Claire POV. By the time I made it through arrivals, my right leg had gone stiff enough to feel like it belonged to someone else. Long flights always did that to me. Too many hours trapped in one position, too much pressure when I stood, and the old injury woke up again, deep and mean, pulsing through bone and scar tissue like it had been waiting for an excuse. I tightened my grip on my suitcase and limped out of the terminal. The airport air smelled like rain, exhaust, and too many people trying to get somewhere at once. I unlocked my phone as I stepped through the automatic doors. The app showed my ride had arrived. Good. One thing today could go right. I called Bob while scanning the curb for the car. I just landed, I told him. The meeting went fine. Good. Come straight to the office, he said. Something big is happening today. Announcement level big. Already on my way. I ended the call when I spotted the black sedan waiting near the pickup lane. It looked cleaner than most Ubers. Too clean, maybe, but I was tired, my leg hurt, and all I wanted was to sit down before my knee decided to stop cooperating altogether. The car sat higher than I expected. When I lifted my bad leg, pain sparked through my thigh and hip. I clenched my jaw, slid into the back seat, and pulled the door shut. The click sounded too final. For half a second, I sat there with my hand still on the door handle, and every instinct in my body went cold. The car was silent. Not ordinary quiet. Not driver waiting for directions quiet. The kind of silence that felt deliberate. The inside smelled like new leather and a clean, expensive cologne that cut through the air with a familiar sharpness. This was not my Uber. Rodwell Street, I said anyway, keeping my eyes down as I shoved my phone into my bag. The driver did not answer. I frowned and looked up. Are you? The question died before it became a sentence. He turned his head enough for me to see his profile. My lungs forgot what they were for. That face. The one I had once known better than my own. The one I had kissed in morning light, in parking lots, in the doorway of my old apartment when neither of us wanted to leave. The face that had ruined me and lived in my memory with cruel, perfect clarity. For a moment, time split open. Then his voice came, low and stunned. Claire? Everything inside me shut down. He was staring at me. I could not move. Then I moved too fast. My hand found the door handle before thought caught up. The cold metal snapped me out of the shock just enough to speak. Sorry, I said. Wrong car. My voice shook so badly I barely recognized it. I pushed the door open and threw one foot out. Warm, wet air rushed in from the curb. Then my right leg buckled. It simply vanished beneath me. I did not step out of the car. I fell out of it. My knee struck the pavement hard enough to send pain up my spine. My suitcase tipped beside me. For a second, all I could do was gasp, each breath rough and shallow, my palms flat against the gritty concrete. Behind me, he said my name again. Claire. That one word froze me worse than the fall. I did not look back. I could not. The sound of his voice had dragged too much up from the place I kept locked. 2 years vanished. The airport, the sedan, the curb, all of it blurred beneath the weight of everything I had spent so long refusing to remember. I tried to stand. My leg would not hold. So I crawled. It was ugly. Desperate. My hand scraped over the pavement as I dragged myself forward, one small movement at a time, away from the open car door and the man inside it. Away from him. Except it was not really him I was running from. It was the version of myself he had left behind. The girl from 2 years ago who had cried herself empty, who had broken in ways no surgery could fully repair, who still lived somewhere under my skin no matter how carefully I ignored her. Wind moved across the curb and carried his scent after me. I kept going. I did not turn around. Only when I reached the shadowed side of the terminal did my body give up. I folded into the corner near the pickup zone, shaking so badly my teeth nearly clicked together. It was him. Adrian Tamer. Even those few seconds had been enough. His voice. His face. The smell of him. It all wrapped around me like wire, painful and familiar, and the worst part was the pull beneath the pain. Some broken part of me still wanted to move closer. My phone buzzed inside my bag. I dug it out with trembling fingers and answered. "Can you find my car?" the driver asked. The real driver. I closed my eyes and forced air into my lungs. I'm coming out now. The words came out thin and unsteady. I wiped my face, smoothed my hair as well as I could, and forced my expression into something that could pass for normal. My knee burned where the skin had scraped open. My leg throbbed. I looked back toward the curb only once, careful not to let my eyes land on the black sedan. The world is big, I told myself as I walked toward the correct car. Big enough that I will never have to see him again. The Uber pulled onto the highway. Airport lights slipped behind us. The city opened ahead in gray strips of concrete and glass. I leaned against the window and tried to breathe through the ache in my leg, but memories had already started climbing over each other. Adrian laughing into my hair. Adrian's hand wrapped around mine under a restaurant table. Adrian telling me about the promotion with the kind of smile people wore when their future had finally chosen them. An overseas office. A chance he could not refuse. He had to go. I had cried. I had shouted. I had begged him not to leave. Then came the accident. My nails dug into my palm. Stop. Do not go there. If I could erase him, I thought, maybe the rest of it would stop hurting too. The office was already alive when I walked in. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. Someone near the printer cursed under their breath. The ordinary noise of the workday wrapped around me, and for one brief moment I let myself pretend everything was fine. Emily popped her head above the partition beside my desk. Back already? Yeah, I said, dropping my bag beside my chair. Everything went smoothly. Her eyes narrowed. What happened to your leg? I glanced down. There was blood near my knee, not much, but enough to make the scraped skin shine. Tripped, I said. It's nothing. I sat and lifted the hem of my skirt just enough to check it. Emily reached into her drawer and handed me a bottle of antiseptic. Here. Clean it before it gets nasty. With your leg, you really shouldn't mess around. Thanks, I said, taking it from her. My throat felt tight. You always save me. She watched me for a moment, quieter now. Are you still planning to get the surgery? My hand jerked, and the antiseptic almost slipped from my fingers. Later, I said. After bonuses come in. Emily did not push. That was one of the reasons I liked her. I cleaned the scrape, ignored the sting, and tried to settle into work. For maybe 15 minutes, I almost managed it. Then Emily leaned over the partition again. I heard they're bringing in a new director today, she said, making a face. Which is ridiculous, by the way. I thought they were finally going to promote you. I gave her a tired smile. I've only been here a year. And you've outsold half the department. That doesn't mean they hand me an office. It should mean something. Before I could answer, the HR director walked in with someone beside him. Can I have everyone's attention for a minute? The room quieted by degrees. Conversations died. Chairs squeaked. A few people stood to get a better look. I turned with everyone else. The pen slipped from my hand and hit the desk. Adrian Tamer stood at the front of the room. 2 years had changed him in ways that felt unfair. He was broader now, his body filling out a charcoal suit that looked tailored to the inch. The unruly dark brown curls I remembered, the ones I used to twist around my fingers when he fell asleep on my couch, had been cut and styled back into something controlled. Sharp. Expensive. His pale blue eyes had changed most. They used to be warm when he looked at me. Lazy, amused, easy to read because I had once believed everything in him was open to me. Now they looked like winter glass. Cold. Focused. Impossible to get through. I stopped breathing again. His gaze moved over the office, polite and distant, until it found me. I looked down too late. I felt him looking anyway. It settled over my skin and stayed there for several long seconds while my heart pounded hard enough to hurt. This is Adrian Tamer, the HR director said. He'll be joining us as the new director. Adrian brings a strong background in sales leadership and management, and we're very pleased to have him with us. People clapped. Someone whispered. Emily made a strangled little sound beside me. The new director? Oh my God. Yeah, I said. I tried to laugh. It sounded fake even to me. Adrian said a few polite words to the room. Nothing personal. Nothing that suggested he had just found his ex-girlfriend sitting 6 desks from his office with a bleeding knee and the emotional stability of a cracked window. Then he disappeared into the director's office. The floor returned to work because offices were cruel that way. Something could happen that knocked the air from your lungs, and the copier would still jam. A client would still call. Someone would still ask who took the last coffee pod. I leaned back in my chair and stared at my desk. Everything was where it always was. Laptop centered. Reports stacked by date. Pens lined up. Sticky notes squared with the edge of the monitor. I kept my space clean because order helped. Order made it easier to believe I was in control of something. Today, it did nothing. The world was small and vicious. Adrian had gotten where he wanted to go. And I was sitting there with an old injury, unpaid surgery, and the memory of what loving him had cost me. Now I was supposed to call him my boss. I picked up a report and tried to read. The words blurred. Numbers I knew by heart lost all meaning. I got through half a paragraph before shoving the folder away and pressing my fingers into my temples. I had spent 2 years learning how not to think about him. He had needed less than one morning to undo it. The director's office door opened. I knew before I looked. Claire, Adrian said. My office. Now. My heart lurched so violently I almost hated it for giving me away. Of course. We could not avoid this forever. Apparently we could not even avoid it until lunch. I did not stand immediately. I sat there with my hands on my desk, staring at nothing, while every version of this reunion I had imagined over the years turned to ash. In my head, I had always been composed. Beautiful, maybe. Successful in a way he would notice. I would say something cutting but calm. He would regret everything. I would not care. In real life, my knee hurt, my palms were scraped, and I wanted to run out of the building. When I finally reached his office door, I had to stand outside for a full minute before knocking. Come in. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city. The blazer was gone. He wore a white dress shirt now, sleeves held neat with black arm garters that circled his biceps and drew attention to the strength beneath the fabric. The shirt fit too well. It traced the line of his chest, his shoulders, the body I had once known in the dark. I hated that I noticed. A memory flashed before I could stop it. My head resting against those arms. His hand moving lazily through my hair. I crushed the corner of the folder into my palm until pain pulled me back into the room. He was not the man who used to live in oversized hoodies and leave coffee rings on my kitchen counter. His face had sharpened. Maturity had settled over him like armor. Those pale blue eyes were still beautiful, but whatever warmth they used to carry had been locked away. I had no interest in looking for the key. Only his scent had stayed the same. Clean. Fresh. Familiar enough to hurt. I took one breath of it by accident and felt memory slice clean through me. I crossed to his desk and set the folder down. Mr. Tamer, I said, keeping my gaze on the file, this is the latest client feedback. He did not move to take it. He did not answer. He just watched me from a few feet away while the office seemed to shrink around us. The lights felt too bright. The air felt too close. Claire, he said at last. My name in his mouth was still a problem. I didn't expect to find you here. His voice was calm. Too calm. 2 years, he said. You've changed. My pulse hammered. I forced myself to lift my eyes to his. So have you. Looks like you got everything you wanted, Mr. Tamer. Congratulations. Something like a smile touched his mouth, though it had no softness in it. I seem to remember you hating sales. I gave him the thinnest smile I had. Maybe I only hated one particular salesman. He nodded once, as if accepting the hit. Fair enough. His gaze did not leave mine. Having you here should make the transition easier, though. We know each other well. My breath caught before I could stop it. A dull pain opened under my ribs. No. I would not do this again. I would not sit outside his office every day, answer his emails, listen for his voice, measure every expression, and pretend old wounds did not split open whenever he got too close. I had survived the wreckage once. I was not volunteering for a second round. I reached into the folder, pulled out a single sheet, and laid it on his desk. Don't count on me, I said. I'm resigning. Effective immediately. Adrian went still. Only one eyebrow lifted. No shock. No panic. If anything, he looked as though some part of him had expected me to bolt. I just arrived, he said, and you're already leaving? Yes. Give me a reason. I met his eyes and held them, even though every instinct screamed at me to look away. Don't ask, I said. It's personal. Claire POV. Personal reasons? He started toward me, one slow step at a time. He picked up my resignation letter from the desk, scanned it briefly, and then leveled his gaze back at mine. This isn't rational. He was barely half a step away. His height dominated my entire field of vision. I could almost feel the heat radiating from beneath his white shirt. It wasn't the warmth I remembered, it was aggressive, predatory. My pulse went into overdrive. I had this sudden, uncontrollable urge to lean into him, but the realization hit me. He wasn't the man I used to know. My breath hitched, and I tightened my fists to steady myself. He picked up a folder from the desk and flipped through the pages. Your numbers are excellent. You're ranked first in the entire department. He set the folder down and looked at me. Why? Performance and resignation aren't mutually exclusive, I shot back with a cold laugh. He nodded. Fair point. A move like this, it's very you. That hit me like a hammer to the chest. It hurt. I wanted to snap back, but I caught my words just in time. Don't provoke him. It's not wise. My hands gripped the edge of the desk. He glanced at the file again before tossing it back onto the desk. I just took over, and my top performer wants out, he said, closing the gap by another half step. We were too close now. What is that going to look like to the rest of the team? The slight rise and fall of his chest sent my thoughts into a tailspin. I turned and took a step back, but he kept pressing in. His heat, his scent, everything I'd spent 2 years trying to bury was now only 2 inches away. Breathing became a struggle. I lifted the resignation letter and held it between us like a shield. I don't care what people think. Just sign it. My breathing was heavy now. He stared at me for a long time, then let out a faint, weary sigh. Claire, you're still as impulsive and childish as ever. He sounded so calm, but the words stung like a physical blow. Impulsive? Childish? That's what he called me 2 years ago when I was sobbing, begging him not to leave. I was just a girl in love back then. Too much in love. I never realized that in his eyes, I was just a joke. Thankfully, that girl died in the accident. So what if I am? I countered harshly. Sign the paper and you won't have to deal with an impulsive, childish subordinate anymore. A ghost of a smirk played on his lips. Not a bad idea. And I want my commission settled immediately. Commissions? The teasing tone vanished. He looked at the folder again. The company has a process. I'm not sure where you are in the pipeline yet, but sales payouts are always delayed. He picked up my letter again. He acted like he was reading it, though there weren't enough words on that page to justify such a long look. Based on my experience, you won't see that money anytime soon. Then check. I'll handle it when I get around to it. I want it handled now. I have my own schedule, Claire. His gaze dropped from my eyes to my lips and lingered there for 2 agonizing seconds. His pale blue eyes flickered, and his pulse thrummed in his throat. Then, he looked away as if nothing had happened. I just started. I'm going to be buried for the first few days. Don't always resort to extremes to solve your problems. My heart constricted. Is that really how you see me? Am I wrong? My knuckles were white against the desk. My breathing turned shallow. But his gaze remained unnervingly steady. I should have known. I actually thought he'd be good to me, or at least cut me some slack for old time's sake. Now I saw him for what he was. A total prick. This wasn't Adrian Tamer anymore. He kept his eyes on me. I told myself not to lose it, not on company time. Finally, I found my voice. It was flat and cold. Fine. I'll take it up with accounting. I won't bother you with it. His gaze drifted from my face down to my legs. Your knee. How is it? Before I could answer, he crouched down, reaching out to hitch up the hem of my pencil skirt. Stop. My whole body went rigid, my voice trembling. "Don't touch me." His hand froze in mid-air, then slowly retracted. Perhaps he finally remembered that he was no longer the man who had the right to touch me whenever he pleased. I wanted to step back, but my legs felt like they were bolted to the floorboards. "Stay away from me," I hissed. "Or are you not worried about a sexual harassment suit?" He stood up, his expression unreadable. He dragged a chair over, planting it right in front of me. "Leg up." His voice was a sub-zero command. "In your dreams," I whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm not going to say it a second time." He sounded even colder now. I hesitated for a beat before slowly lifting my leg and resting it on the chair. I gripped the edge of the desk, fighting to stay upright. I hated this. I hated obeying him. The fall at the airport had done real damage to my already fragile leg. Lifting it now sent a sharp, hot flash of pain through the joint. I gritted my teeth, refusing to let out so much as a whimper. He pointed at my knee. "Pull the skirt up. Or I'll do it for you." I glared at him, but eventually, I gripped the side of the fabric and pulled it up just enough to expose the bruised knee. He leaned in to inspect it. He kept a professional distance just far enough away that I couldn't technically accuse him of anything. The locked memories broke free then, clawing at my mind. Me, crying as I pointed to a scratch, him, laughing softly as he disinfected the wound, calling me his fragile glass flower. But now, I didn't want him near me. Not even a finger. This scrape was nothing compared to the surgical steel buried deep inside my thigh. That steel was a constant reminder, aching and numbing, of the nightmare I'd lived through. That was the pain that truly kept me from breathing. "Seen enough?" I asked coldly. His body stiffened. He straightened up. His eyes swirled with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Walking back to his desk, he sat down, slipping back into his director persona. "You've really decided to leave?" He grabbed the pen and lowered it. The nib was on the verge of touching the paper when he suddenly stopped. He stared at me, his light blue eyes as flat and still as a frozen sea. "There's no chance of you staying?" "None." He watched me for 2 long seconds. "You're sure?" "Positive." The pen descended, carving a graceful line across the paper. Then, he slid the sheet back toward me. "There you go." I picked it up, and the blood rushed to my head in a blinding heat. Written across the page was, "Denied. You bastard." Even 2 years ago, at the height of my hatred, I had never spoken to him like that. He just capped his pen with agonizing slowness and looked up, indifferent. "I have a responsibility to maintain the stability of my sales force. Please try to understand." I crumpled the resignation letter into a ball and turned to go. I grabbed the door handle, intending to slam it hard enough to shake the walls. But at the last millisecond, I caught the momentum. Upsetting him further was a bad move. My bonus was still in his hands. More importantly, he was a different man now. I had no idea what the consequences of another outburst would be. I could still feel his icy stare burning a hole in my back. I let the tension bleed out of my hand, turned around, and gave him a beautiful, lethal, and utterly fake smile. Claire POV. The next morning, I barely stepped into the office when Emily came jogging toward me, breathless. "Claire, why are you so late? Get to the conference room, now. The new director is calling a meeting." By the time I grabbed my notebook and hurried in, everyone was already seated. I was the last one. The meeting hadn't officially started yet, and the room was filled with the low hum of chatter. Adrian sat at the head of the table in another bespoke suit. His posture rigid, radiating a cold, commanding authority. His icy gaze swept across the room and locked onto my face. I ignored him, scanning the rows for an empty chair. He flicked his wrist to check his watch. 1 minute late. His voice wasn't too loud, but it cut through the buzzing room like a blade, silencing everyone instantly. Every head turned toward me. I felt a flash of heat crawl up my neck, but I met his stare with a frigid look of my own. Then, I forced a smile so fake it felt like plastic. "My apologies, Mr. Tamer. But for the record, I was at my desk by 8:59. His expression tightened for a fraction of a second before melting into a faint, condescending smirk. He let his eyes linger on me for 1 beat too long before looking away. In the conference room, everyone had huddled as far away from him as possible, leaving only 2 empty seats directly to his left and right. I cursed myself for not getting there earlier. I squeezed in next to Emily, leaving a single empty chair between Adrian and me as a buffer. "My God," Emily hissed, leaning in. "You really just threw shade at the director in front of everyone?" "Let him fire me," I muttered. I glanced his way again, and our eyes met. 1 second. 2 seconds. He didn't look away. Neither did I. But my heart suddenly betrayed me, skipping several frantic beats. I dropped my gaze, though I could still feel the weight of his stare pressing against me. I flipped my notebook open and scribbled. "Department meeting, time, XXX. Let us begin." The moment Adrian spoke, the room went dead silent. He stood up and pulled a slide deck onto the large screen. "You're all aware of the sales figures over the last 2 years. In my professional opinion, they are abysmal. You're sitting on world-class equipment, yet the numbers don't reflect that. Everyone in this room shares that responsibility." All eyes were on him, the room thick with a heavy, focused silence. I sat up straighter, forcing myself to actually listen. The light from the screen cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the high bridge of his nose and the powerful, clean line of his jaw. That was the same silhouette I had traced 1,000 times with my fingertips. Back then, he wasn't this cold, this mechanical. But I had to admit, there was a magnetic power in the way he worked. I'd never seen this side of him before. I rested my chin on my hand, my thoughts starting to drift. The memories I'd kept padlocked in a box were leaking out through the cracks, making my breathing shallow. My pen jerked, leaving a jagged, crooked line across the page. "No. Stop staring at him. Get it together." Emily gave my arm a sharp nudge. "He is talking to you." I jolted upright. "What?" Adrian was watching me, and from the look on his face, he'd been doing it for a while. The entire room was staring at me. "I'd like you to share your perspective with the group," he said, his voice laced with a subtle, mocking edge. I leaned toward Emily. "Share what?" "Your strategy for client acquisition and retention," she whispered. I shot a glare toward Adrian. He was looking right at me, a faint, wicked glint in his eyes. He knew exactly what he was doing. This was a setup. I scrambled to pull my thoughts together as quickly as possible. "I'm sorry, but many people in this room are far more senior than I am. I don't have any wisdom worth sharing." His smirk deepened. "Our top performer is suddenly so humble." I tilted my chin up, meeting his eyes with a sidelong glare. "It was luck. Nothing more." He went silent for a few seconds, though his gaze never wavered. "I'm a big believer in resource sharing within a team. I suggest you start getting used to it." Emily nudged me again. "Just say something. Anything." The entire department was watching me. I didn't want to turn this meeting into a shouting match. I looked down at my notebook and flipped to a specific page. "Fine. I'll give a brief overview of the Blue Windmill food account I'm currently managing. I just flew out for a site visit yesterday and had an in-depth strategy session with their key stakeholders. Once I shifted into work mode, the words came easily. I broke down the entire life cycle of the deal: lead gen, initial outreach, discovery, the on-site. I could talk about this for hours. The sales team had always been good to me, and Bob had mentored me since back when I didn't even know what a sales funnel was. I had nothing to hide. The room was silent as I spoke. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time, which made my pulse thrum with a nervous energy. I kept my focus on my colleagues, giving him nothing but my profile. When I was halfway through the Blue Windmill briefing, "Sorry, let me stop you there," he interrupted. I was forced to turn and face him. "Did you fail to mention the hardware scalability options for their future upgrades?" I paused. "I didn't bring it up, no." He gave a thin, effortless smile. "The goal of sales is to maximize company profit while meeting the client's needs. Leaving money on the table like that, in my book, that's an amateur mistake." I snapped my notebook shut, my chin high. "With all due respect, I don't see a problem with my approach." He nodded slowly, as if witnessing something absurd. "Failing to offer a roadmap for scalability means you've capped your own commission and the company's growth. That's how I've always handled my accounts." The corner of his mouth twitched into a grin. "Exactly. Like a rookie." My face burned. I gripped my notebook, fighting to suppress the frantic surge of anger in my chest. Well, I'm obviously no match for the director. Word is the company paid a fortune to headhunt you. Why don't you enlighten us with one of your legendary success stories? A few scattered, hesitant claps echoed through the room. Adrian let that arrogant, condescending smile linger for a few seconds, but he didn't take the bait. To increase efficiency, all sales accounts will now be handled in pairs, he announced, shifting gears. Partners will collaborate and share all data. He paused and pulled out a list. Claire will be paired with me. Emily and Carter. Wait, I cut him off. My voice rang out through the spacious conference room. He stopped and looked over. I don't want to be paired with you. A ripple of hushed laughter went around the table. He didn't even bother asking why. He just kept reading the list as if I hadn't spoken at all. As if I didn't even exist. Until he finished the list, he finally turned his gaze back to me. I was fuming, my chest heaving with every ragged breath. I was waiting for him to challenge me. I was ready. I had 10 different reasons locked and loaded to shut him down. Meeting adjourned. He said nothing else as he stood up and strode out of the room. Claire POV. He just walked out? It felt like I swung a heavy punch only to hit thin air. No. This isn't over. I grabbed my notebook and went after him, my heels clicking a frantic, rhythmic beat against the floor. Adrian was all long strides and raw momentum. He already vanished around the corner of the hallway. I broke into a jog, but my right leg, stiff from sitting too long, protested with every step. I saw him disappear into the director's office and pushed myself to catch up. I burst through the door only to find him standing exactly one step inside, as if he'd been waiting for me. I tried to slam on the brakes, but my treacherous leg wouldn't cooperate. I slammed right into him. A small gasp escaped my throat as I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact of the floor. Instead, a sudden warmth enveloped me. He caught me, holding me steady in a firm, unbreakable grip. Time didn't just slow down, it froze. My brain followed suit. It could have been seconds or milliseconds before I jolted awake, my hands scrambling for purchase, desperate to push away. My palms landed flat against his chest. My heart skipped a beat, and for a terrifying moment, I forgot to move my hands. Thankfully, the dull throb in my bad leg snapped me back to reality. I stood up straight, my face and ears burning a deep, colonial red. Sorry. I managed to choke out, stepping back. He looked down at me, a cryptic, ghost of a smile tugging at his frozen expression. Why were you? I started to snap at him for standing behind the door, but he just pointed at his chest. My pupils dilated in horror. There, on the pristine white fabric of his shirt, was a vibrant, jagged lipstick stain. I froze. The heat in my face reached a boiling point. I lunged for a box of tissues on his desk and pressed a clump of them against his chest, rubbing frantically. I'm sorry, I didn't. It wasn't on purpose. He didn't say a word. I didn't dare look up, but I could feel it. He was mocking me. The only thought looping in my mind was wishing the floor would just open up and swallow me whole. Outside, the muffled sounds of the office grew louder as people returned from the meeting. Wait, the door. Red-faced, I spun around and kicked the office door shut. Oh God. I lunged at him. Now I locked us in. He arched a single, elegant eyebrow. What now? Get it off, obviously. I grabbed more tissues and went back to work, scrubbing at the stain. My fingers occasionally brushed against the hard muscle of his chest. He was broader, stronger than he'd been 2 years ago. His body heat and that hauntingly familiar scent made it impossible to breathe. My heart was racing. I knew the scrubbing was useless, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let him win. But then, the air shifted. His breathing sounded heavier, darker. My hand stiffened. I dropped the shredded tissues to the floor. It's not coming out, I muttered, leaning back against the desk in defeat. Just fire me. Get it over with. He dropped the amused spectator act and spread his arms. And then what? When people ask what happened, I should just tell them you branded me? Don't you dare. Frustrated, I grabbed more tissues for one last attempt, but I knew it was a lost cause. I balled them up and hurled them into the trash. The silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. After a moment, he spoke, his voice low and rhythmic. Fine. I have a spare in the locker. You couldn't have mentioned that earlier? Relief flooded through me, only to vanish a second later. He'd been playing with me. He opened the cabinet and pulled out a fresh shirt. As far as I was concerned, I was off the hook. Great. I'm leaving. My hand reached for the doorknob. Wait. I turned back, looking at him. Help me with it. My heart did a violent somersault. Absolutely not, I snapped, my voice jumping an octave. He shrugged and made a move to put the clean shirt back in the locker. Suit yourself. The metal of the doorknob felt ice cold against my palm. One turn, and I'd be free. But I couldn't do it. He'd keep that lipstick stain like a trophy. A piece of leverage to use against me. I let go of the handle and turned to face him, my breath coming in shallow, jagged bursts. Mr. Tamer, don't you think this borders on sexual harassment? I asked, my voice a forced mask of calm. He just shrugged. Someone lunges at me and kisses my chest. I'm not sure who is harassing whom here. The heat I'd just managed to drain from my face came rushing back. I bit my lip, hesitating for a few painful seconds. Fine. You take it off. I'll help you into the new one. But he didn't move. He simply spread his arms and looked at the ceiling, waiting. I closed my eyes and cursed under my breath. You prick. I walked toward him, my face a carefully constructed blank. He watched me, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. Jacket off. Tie removed. I reached for the first button of his shirt. The scent, the proximity, it was all too familiar. We had once been so close. The cracks in the box where I'd buried my memories split wide open, and the past came crashing out, rattling around my skull. My breathing fractured, and my fingers began to shake. I had this sudden, aching urge to lean into that warm chest. To just fall in. Maybe then it wouldn't hurt so much. But I couldn't. Logic was screaming in my head, a siren warning me to stay back. 1 button. 2. Once the shirt was open, I took a sharp breath, closed my eyes. I turned my face away to avoid the sight of him. I pulled the stained shirt off and draped the clean one over his shoulders. My fingers brushed against his warm skin, a fleeting, accidental touch that sent a dull ache through my heart. I didn't need to see. Every inch of him was etched into my muscle memory. I worked quickly, fastening the buttons by feel, then looped the tie around his neck and knotted it with practiced efficiency. When I finished, I felt completely drained, as if I'd run a marathon. I stepped back, my eyes still tightly shut. Put the jacket on yourself, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. We're even. He didn't say a word. I kept my eyes closed, my body rigid as the ghosts of our past swirled around us. Then, I heard him let out a soft, low chuckle. That's it? His voice was still laced with that infuriating playfulness. Aren't you going to tuck it in for me? My hands balled into fists. Don't push it, Adrian. I yelled, my voice breaking into a sob. I was gasping for air, and every breath felt like glass in my lungs. In the white noise of my panic, I felt his hands reach out and gently cup my face. His thumb brushed over the wetness on my cheek. The air in the room seemed to solidify. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, terrified that if I opened them, he would vanish like a fever dream. Then, his lips brushed against mine, a soft, ghost of a kiss. Claire, don't cry. I snapped my eyes open. That face, that beautiful, arrogant face I tried so hard to hate, was inches from mine. I recoiled instantly, slapping his hand away. Get lost. Don't you ever touch me again. I scrubbed at my mouth, trying to erase the sensation of his lips, my mind a chaotic mess. I yanked the door open. The sight of my colleagues busy at their desks felt like a physical assault on my nerves. I forced myself to hide the wreckage of my emotions and marched straight to the toilet. Locked inside a stall, I pulled my arms around myself, shaking uncontrollably. What was that to him? What made him think he had the right to treat me like that? A dull, rhythmic throb started in my right leg. I leaned my head against the cold partition and let the tears fall. Claire POV. I stayed in the stall for a long time before I finally forced myself to come out. I splashed cold water onto my face repeatedly, desperate to numb the heat. Eventually, I gathered the courage to look up and face myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. The phantom sensation of his fingers still lingered on my skin, warm and unnervingly gentle. I traced the line of my cheek where he had touched me, and my breathing fractured all over again. By the time I composed myself and walked back toward the sales floor, Adrian was just coming out. He locked his eyes on me. I kept mine fixed on the floor. We brushed past each other in the doorway. He faltered for a fraction of a second, but I quickened my pace. I was in full retreat. Back at my desk, I buried myself in work. A chat window popped up on my screen. It was him. "We need to talk." The dull ache returned to my eyes. I grabbed a tissue, blotted away a stray tear, and typed back. "Sorry. Professional matters only." There was nothing left to discuss. I didn't want to recount the tragedy of my last 2 years to him. I didn't want him to know how hard I fought just to crawl out of the wreckage. That was in the past. And so were we. The previous director had been laid back. The pressure was low, and the workflows were casual. That was the only reason a rookie like me had survived. He was a nice guy, even if he couldn't hit the numbers the board wanted. Adrian had been there for exactly 1 day, and already new policies were dropping like clockwork. Evaluations, KPIs, mandatory strategy sessions, everything was more complex, more rigorous. Our workload had effectively doubled, and the office was buzzing with whispered complaints. Deep down, I knew his methods were superior. I knew I'd grow faster under his system. But because of our history, my gut twisted in resistance to every new rule he announced. After finishing a client's needs analysis, I got up to clear my head. My legs, however, seemed to have a mind of their own. They carried me straight to HR. I hesitated at the door before stepping inside. Alia, the HR specialist, was a friend. I leaned over her cubicle and lowered my voice. "Alia, I wanted to check on the procedure for a resignation." She looked up from her monitor, startled. "What is going on with sales? You're the third person to ask today. Is the new director that bad?" I gave her a tight, forced smile. "It's just, the pressure is a bit much." Alia giggled. "He's a legend, Claire. The board moved mountains to headhunt him. The firm even had to pay out a massive buyout fee to his old company. Besides, he's young and gorgeous. I'm thinking of transferring to sales myself." Her eyes were gleaming with interest. I swallowed my disappointment. "Right. Got it. If you're serious about leaving," Alia's gaze suddenly shifted past my shoulder. "Mr. Tamer?" My chest tightened. Adrian was standing right behind me. I turned to bolt, but he blocked my path. "My office. Now." Alia gave me a sympathetic grimace and buried her head back in her work. When I got back to the sales department, I crawled back into my cubicle instead. I wasn't going into that office. The shirt incident had been humiliating enough. I wasn't going to subject myself to a sequel. A notification pinged on my monitor. "Get in here." A wave of resentment washed over me. I let the cursor blink for a long minute before I typed my response. "We can talk here. I'm not stepping foot in your office again." The other side went silent for a beat. Then, "Strictly business." He definitely overheard my conversation with Alia. This was going to be an interrogation. I took a breath. Whatever. I was leaving anyway. What was he going to do? I knocked and entered. He was typing away, eyes fixed on the screen. Without looking up, he gestured for me to sit while he finished his task. There was no denying it, he had this magnetic, aggressive pull when he worked. That sharp, focused intensity made him even more dazzling than he'd been 2 years ago. I walked over and pulled out the chair across from him. "Mr. Tamer. You wanted to see me?" I intentionally left the office door wide open. The sight of my colleagues bustling around outside was the only thing keeping me grounded. He glanced at the open door, clearly clocking my move. He stopped typing and slid the folder I'd turned in earlier across the mahogany. "I looked over your proposal." I leaned back and crossed my fingers. "Let me guess. You think it's trash?" He gave me a polite, hollow smile. "Your self-assessment is remarkably accurate." I jolted upright, the words out of my mouth before I could stop them. "I worked my ass off on that. I spent weeks on that strategy." He looked at me, his voice so flat it was dismissive. "Effort doesn't equal excellence." Like I said, you're a rookie. You're really going to dismiss my value? I'm the top-ranked seller in this office. He let out a short, soft laugh, as if he were watching a child try to explain the world. That's your interpretation. Being number one here, it doesn't mean much to me. He dragged out those last few words. They were quiet, but they hit me like a sledgehammer. My hard work meant nothing. I suppose in his eyes, my love hadn't meant much either. A sharp sting bloomed in my chest. I balled my hands into fists. Fine. Since my limited abilities aren't up to your standards, just fire me and be done with it. His eyes turned cold. This sales team is nowhere near where it needs to be. I don't give up on employees, no matter how subpar they are. He turned the monitor toward me. And stop being so emotional about it. That was the match in the powder keg. Emotional? I put everything into that draft, you call it garbage, and I'm not allowed to feel anything? I stood up so abruptly the chair shrieked against the floor. Mr. Tamer, I am clearly never going to meet your expectations. If you're as smart as everyone says, you know exactly what the solution is. I didn't bother lowering my voice. As I turned to leave, I saw half the office staring through the open door. I marched toward the exit. Get back here. His voice was low, vibrating with a power that made my stomach drop. I kept walking. The next second, his hand clamped around my arm, and I was hauled back into the chair. I let out a sharp cry of surprise. He let go instantly, a flash of hesitation flickering in his eyes. I glared at him, trembling. What the hell do you think you're doing? He paused for 2 seconds, then shoved the keyboard and mouse toward me. Fix it. I curled my lip. No way. He leaned in, cloaked in a chilling, heavy authority. Do exactly what I tell you. My chest constricted. The man standing over me was a stranger. His dominance, his control, his suppressed rage, it was suffocating. My fingertips turned to ice, and I gripped the edge of the desk just to stay upright. The commotion had brought the office to a standstill. My coworkers were watching us in stunned silence. Adrian straightened his lapels and walked to the door. Slam. The sound of the door closing made my heart leap into my throat. He stood 2 paces away and spoke with a cold finality. Fix the proposal. Now. Claire POV. I turned to look at him, my eyes burning with resentment and blatant defiance. He remained unnervingly calm, as if he were simply scheduling a routine meeting. We were at a deadlock. I didn't move an inch. He didn't step toward me. Seconds bled into minutes. Eventually, he pulled a chair over and sat down right next to me. The breath I'd managed to steady was snatched away again. Thankfully, he kept his eyes on the monitor instead of me, allowing my frayed nerves to settle. If only slightly. Like I said, keep your feelings out of the workspace. He used the mouse to highlight a paragraph. You've listed all these specs for the automated warehouse sensors, motors, all of it. But what is the client supposed to take away from this? How much money does it save them? How much time? Have you actually run the numbers against our competitors' data? His arm was so close to mine I could practically feel the contour of his muscles. When he was in work mode, that absolute sense of authority and control pulled up my nerves like a physical weight. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. My thoughts were a tangled mess, my vision blurring as I stared at the screen. He stopped talking and turned to look at me. Then, he reached out and snapped his fingers right in front of my face. Click. Are you even with me? Huh? Oh, yeah. I scrambled to pull myself back to reality. He frowned, his eyes narrowing. Look right here. Okay. Did you run the projections? The what? He took a deep, controlled breath, his eyes masking a flicker of suppressed rage. I braced myself for the explosion, but it never came. He simply repeated the question, his voice tight. No. I didn't run them. Fine. He swallowed his anger. The page scrolled down. What about the differentiators? Where are our exclusive advantages compared to the other brands? I didn't include that. Fantastic. The document kept scrolling. He continued the briefing, his tone rich and his arguments impeccably structured. I sat there, my thoughts were a tangled knot. I couldn't tell if it was because of the technical critique or simply because of him. Finally, the talking stopped. You. Listening? He asked, punctuating every word. I jolted, my heart hammering against my ribs. I've always written them this way, I muttered, defensive. It hasn't stopped me from hitting my targets. He gave a thin, cold smile. Not on my watch. Not in my department. I shrugged. Then I'm sorry, Mr. Tamer. I guess I'm just not cut out for this. His gaze turned to ice. He shoved the mouse toward me. Fix it now. I'll walk you through it. I leaned back into the headrest, putting as much distance between us as possible. I don't know how. His jaw tightened until I saw the muscle pulse. I'll teach you. Don't bother. Before the words were out of my mouth, he grabbed my hand and forced it onto the mouse. Stop talking. Just fix it. My heart skipped a beat. His hand was large, warm, and the grip was absolute. I tried to pull away, but he clamped down, refusing to let go. It was just like before, the way he used to hold my hand. Tight. Possessive. Panic surged through me, and my fingers went rigid. I looked up. Our eyes locked, and for a split second, the world outside that office ceased to exist. I forgot how to breathe. The icy blue of his eyes seemed to be thawing, shifting into something I couldn't name. The office was too quiet. So quiet that the only sound was the heavy, synchronized rhythm of our breathing. Suddenly, he let go of my hand and jerked his gaze away. His voice dropped, losing its edge. Just get it done. My stiff fingers twitched uncontrollably. I took the mouse and slowly scrolled through the document, but the words were just meaningless shapes on the screen. My heart was too loud, and my vision was a blur. I shoved the mouse away with a sharp jerk. I can't do this. I'm not editing it. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. I was just praying he'd finally lose his patience and throw me out. Instead, he stood up and walked back to his side of the desk. I'm busy, he said, his tone leveling out. You're going to sit right there. You don't leave until that editing is finished. By what authority? I snapped. He gave me a thin, ghost of a smile. You haven't resigned yet. As long as you're on the payroll, you do the work. And if I just don't? He was already flipping through a new folder, his focus shifting. I have plenty of ways to handle you, Claire. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight of authority that made my skin prickle. I leaned back in the chair and crossed my arms defiantly. Fine. I'd love to see you try. He didn't acknowledge me again. A knock sounded at the door. Enter, he called out. Emily stepped in, a stack of files cradled in her arms. When she saw me sitting there, her eyes nearly popped out of her head. Mr. Tamer, these are the project logs I've been managing. Thanks. Put them on the desk. He glanced up for a fraction of a second before returning to his paperwork. As Emily turned to leave, she caught my eye and flashed a frantic, silent what the hell, expression. I just gave her a helpless shrug and went back to my standoff. Once again, it was just the two of us. I sat there like a delinquent student serving detention. After a few minutes of staring into space, I pulled out my phone and opened TikTok. The upbeat, frantic music of a comedy clip suddenly blared through the quiet office. Adrian frowned, his gaze flicking toward me with clear irritation, but he didn't say a word. He was buried, reviewing documents, signing off on requests, taking calls. His pen never seemed to stop moving. Gradually, the boredom began to set in. I lowered the volume on my phone and started watching him from the corner of my eye. The way he was so clipped and decisive on the phone, the sharp, piercing way he dissected a report. This was a side of him he'd never shown me 2 years ago. His eyes were so much colder now. But his lips thin, soft, they looked exactly the same. I realized I'd stopped scrolling. He finished a call and his gaze swept across the room, colliding head-on with mine. A jolt of electricity shot through me. I let out a dry cough and buried my face in my phone, letting the mindless video audio mask my humiliation. The minutes crawled by. Clock-out time came and went. Outside, the office began to empty as my colleagues trickled out, but Adrian remained buried in his paperwork, showing absolutely no intention of leaving. I hesitated, wanting to remind him that the day was over, but the memory of his icy stare made me swallow the words. He was a total workaholic now. He hadn't been like this before. Back then, he couldn't wait to get home just to be near me, to lose ourselves in each other. I cursed him silently. Sitting there at his desk doing nothing made me feel like an idiot. I'd lost interest in TikTok long ago. I've always loathed being bored. Giving in to the restless energy, I pulled up the cloud document for the proposal on my phone. Following the points he grilled me on, I began typing, adding new content bit by bit. Outside the window, the sky bruised into a deep twilight. Adrian finally looked up, his expression cold and drawn. "Are you done playing around?" I clicked my phone screen off and met his gaze with a smirk. He let out a long, weary sigh and swiveled his monitor back toward me. "Fine. I'll walk you through the edits," he said, moving to stand beside me. "Pay attention." He scrolled through the document, only to find the screen lit up with colored revision marks. He froze. He shot me a look of pure disbelief before scrolling all the way to the final page. "How did you?" I leaned back in the chair and let out a triumphant laugh. Every inch of the document had been overhauled. I'd just finished it. It had cost me a significant number of brain cells, but it was done. A flash of genuine pride sparked in his eyes, but he smothered it instantly, his face returning to a mask of stone. "You just had to turn this into a fight, didn't you?" I looked at him, savoring the small victory. "Mr. Tamer, for the sake of your future, I hope you consider adjusting your brute force approach with your staff. That depends entirely on your cooperation." I stood up to leave, but I'd forgotten I'd been sitting in the same position for too long. My right leg was completely numb. The moment I tried to take a step, I felt the danger. A small gasp escaped me as I reached out, desperate for anything to hold on to. My body pitched forward, out of control. My only thought was, "Not again." The next second, Adrian's arm shot out, and I slammed hard into his chest. Everything went dark. As if someone had flipped a master switch in the dead of night. Fear and despair clawed at my throat. I began to shake uncontrollably, my breath hitching in a sob that wouldn't come out. My leg. It was happening again. Worse than last time. It was getting worse every single time. I couldn't think I could only gasp for air like a drowning person. Adrian's light, teasing chuckle sounded from above. "All right, crying after one little trip? You're still as sensitive as ever." He braced me, tilting my face up to meet his. "Come on, crybaby, I've got you." The smile on his face froze. "Claire? What's wrong?" His voice was trembling now. "Don't scare me. Tell me this is a joke." My consciousness slowly clawed its way back to the surface. "I'm fine." I pushed off him, forcing myself to stand on my own. I wanted to scream that it wasn't a joke. But that time in hell. I truly didn't want to speak a single word of it. Adrian POV. The car sat idling at the curb outside Clara's apartment. I ran my fingers deep through my hair. God, she was stubborn. Getting her into the car was hard enough, but letting me walk her up. That was a dead end. All I could do was sit there and track her through the windshield as she struggled toward the building. She moved with such painstaking care, like she was walking on broken glass. And the worst part? I couldn't do a damn thing to help. I had convinced myself that coming back meant I could reclaim what we once had. But seeing her like this, it was clear. She was no longer within my orbit. She was outside my control. What happened to her? After that fall, she was a total stranger. She'd insist she was done with the editing, only to go behind my back and pour her heart into polishing it. She'd keep her face cold and tell me I was a tyrant to the staff, but there was always this warmth in her eyes she couldn't hide, a smile just waiting to break through. In those moments, I truly believed she was the Claire from 2 years ago. The girl I loved down to my very marrow. But that fall. That inexplicable, sudden fall turned the entire office into a godforsaken icebox. She cried with a desperation that gutted me. She shook as if she were reliving a nightmare. Before I could even wrap my head around it, she had forced herself back up and put an ocean of distance between us. Cold. Untouchable. It was as if she had slipped into a different world entirely. "Claire, talk to me. What's going on?" She took a small, tentative step forward, her voice still brittle and trembling. "Work is over. I should go home." "You've fallen twice in a single day," I said, my hand snapping out to catch her arm. "Tell me what the hell is happening." She turned her face toward me, staring at my hand. Her eyes were unfocused, drowning in helplessness and a raw, visceral fear. My heart skipped a beat, a cold realization that I was scaring her. I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. Silence stretched between us until she started walking again. This time, her gait was steadier. I kept pace beside her. "Let me take you back." "No need. At least rest for a minute before you leave." "I'm fine." A sharp pang, like a needle through my heart, made my voice rise despite myself. "You can't drive like this, Claire. You know you can't." She froze. Her eyes went hollow, filled with a sudden, crushing pain. Guilt flooded me instantly. I lowered my voice, softened it. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell." She said nothing. I waited a beat before trying again. "It's dinner time. Have a meal with me, and then I'll get you home." "No." The word was soft, but it carried the weight of a mountain. "Do you have a roommate? What are you going to do about food?" She just whispered that no again. Then she stepped into the elevator, leaned her weight against the cold metal wall, and closed her eyes. She was shutting me out, closing every door to communication. And eventually, she disappeared into the safety of her apartment. I went back to my own place, a hollow shell of a home, and sat in the dark. I felt drifted, exhausted. When the job offer from this company first landed, I could barely contain the adrenaline. It meant my 5-year contract with the firm overseas could be terminated in 2. It meant I could get back to Claire sooner. Even though I had lost track of her years ago. Just being back in the same city felt like a win. I told myself I'd find her, no matter what. 2 years ago, I left for her. 2 years later, I came back for her. Then, that day at the airport. I was waiting for a friend when a girl climbed into the back of my car. "Aren't we moving?" "I'm in a hurry." That voice. My heart nearly stopped in my chest. It was the voice that had haunted my nights for 2 years. I didn't dare turn around, terrified it was just another hallucination. But my voice betrayed me. It slipped out of my throat before I could stop it. I terrified her. Watching her scramble out of the car and vanish into the crowd was a special kind of hell. I regretted not stopping her right then and there. But if fate was going to drop her back into my life, I wasn't going to let her slip away again. I tapped my phone awake and stared at her chat window for what felt like an eternity, my thumb hovering over the screen before I finally hit send. "Have you eaten? Want me to drop off some dinner?" I waited. The minutes ticked by, stretching into a hollow silence. No reply. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. I knew this was coming. It was the same story as 2 years ago. The only difference now was that I was her boss. She couldn't block me, and she couldn't delete me. The Claire from 2 years ago, the girl who laughed easily, cried freely, and clung to me like her life depended on it, was gone. In her place stood someone cool, independent, and impossibly stubborn. But I could feel it in my gut. Something had happened. And she was hell-bent on making sure I never found out what. I sprang from the sofa, cracked open my laptop, and logged into the company's internal system. I had the clearance. I could see everything. But the trail was thin. She'd been with the firm for about 18 months, and on paper, she was a total rookie. Her sales volume was modest, except for one recent deal that looked like a massive stroke of luck. It had catapulted her to the top of the department overnight. Then, my eyes caught a line in her hiring file. A small note in the margins. Recommended by Emily. Emily? Why would she recommend a girl with a background in administrative work for a high-pressure sales role? I dug deeper. Right after ID left for my overseas contract, Claire had resigned from our old firm. 6 months later, she landed here. She had always hated sales. She used to complain about how my hectic schedule was suffocating us. So why the hell was she doing this now? On my desk, the phone stayed dark. The chat bubble was a dead end. I clicked the screen off and tossed the phone aside. She wasn't going to write back. I knew her too well for that. The next morning, I beat Claire to the office. Emily was already there, though. Years of managing people told me everything I needed to know about her at a glance. She was the loyal type, the kind of girl who'd go to bat for a friend, even if her own sales numbers were just hovering at average. I took a few seconds to sharpen my approach. Emily, a word in my office. Emily strolled in with her usual blunt energy. Mr. Tamer, you needed something? Call me Adrian, I said, pulling up a chair to sit beside her. I didn't want this to feel like an interrogation. Not yet. I'm looking to hand-pick a few people in the department for a fast-track leadership program. To do that, I need the full-picture personality, history, the works. I kept my voice casual, like I was just talking shop. Her eyes lit up instantly. I get it. You want the lowdown on Claire, right? My heart took a hit. Did she have to be that sharp? I gave a curt nod. I need everything you can give me. That was all the encouragement she needed. She took off, a mile a minute. I knew it. Someone like her was bound to get noticed. Claire's gorgeous, she's a hustler, even after we clock out, she's taking files home to study. It was good to hear, but it wasn't what I was looking for. That's great, but I had to cut her off. I'm concerned that if I load her up with too much, she might hit a wall. She seems fragile. Emily jumped right in. Exactly. I mean, with her health being so brittle. Her voice trailed off, the realization of how much she'd leaked hitting her all at once. The smile froze on her face, turning into a stiff, forced mask. She looks a bit delicate, Emily pressed, playing dumb to her sudden shift in mood. That's where my hesitation comes from. Well. She was clearly scrambling for an exit strategy. You probably shouldn't push her too hard. My heart sank. Oh? Why is that? Emily hesitated for 2 seconds before snapping on a perfect, professional fake smile. No reason. I just don't want her burning out. She works hard enough as it is. The lead went cold. I wasn't going to get anything else out of her today. I stood up and offered my hand. Thanks, Emily. I'll keep that in mind. Claire arrived just as Emily was leaving. I watched them through the glass, huddled at their desks, whispering. From Emily's exaggerated gestures, I didn't need to be a mind reader to know she was reporting back on our little chat. Claire was hiding something big. Something that had fundamentally rewired who she was. I had to know. I'd use every resource at my disposal to find out. But this time I wouldn't force her. Claire POV. Adrian might have figured something out. The second I walked into the office, Emily told me he'd pulled her aside for a chat. Thank God she was sharp enough to keep her mouth shut about the accident. We were supposed to be strangers who just happened to meet in a hospital ward. She'd helped me out of the goodness of her heart. And once I'd recovered, she was the one who told me about the sales opening at her firm. I'd be grateful to her for the rest of my life. Claire, the director definitely has a thing for you. Her smile was laced with mischief. My fingers stiffened against my keyboard. I gave her a shove, pushing her back toward her own cubicle. Not a chance. He locked me in his office yesterday to rewrite a proposal. You all saw that. I guess. She looked thoughtful for a second. But then why was he digging for info like that? The awkwardness was becoming unbearable. I shoved her head back behind the partition again. He just wants me to hit my targets. Go back to work, Emily. After what happened last night, I did my best to stay invisible. I packed my schedule with field visits or stayed glued to my desk, moving as little as possible. But every time I looked up, I could see a silhouette behind the blinds of the glass partition. I wasn't sure if he was watching me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was. That frantic energy lasted for a few days. Fortunately, he didn't come looking for me. Then today, the gray clouds hung low and heavy outside. Before long, fat droplets of rain began to fall, blurring the world into a gray haze. I hated rainy days. The dull ache in my thigh was already starting to flare up. The surgical steel implanted in my bone meant I couldn't sit or stand for too long, and rainy days were the worst. It was a cocktail of soreness, numbness, and sharp stabs of pain. On days like this, I always called an Uber. I didn't trust my right leg enough to control a car. I was supposed to have the hardware removed 6 months ago, but I was still holding out for that bonus check. My mood tanked at the thought. I was so young, yet my body felt like a machine on the verge of being scrapped. I went to the break room and poured a cup of coffee. I took a small sip, staring blankly at the rain. Claire. The familiar voice made my hand jerk, nearly slopping coffee over the rim. I turned around as Adrian strode in. When he saw me, a flicker of something relief? Joy? Flashed in his eyes before his expression smoothed into a calm mask. I gripped the mug with both hands and gave him a professional nod. I'm heading out to a client meeting. You're coming with me. My heart sank. I glanced out the window. Today? Now. I froze, taking a subconscious gulp of coffee. It tasted strange today. Bitter. Can we do it another day? I asked. He was silent for 2 beats. Why? It's raining. The words were barely out of my mouth before my voice went cold. His eyebrows arched slightly. I quickly recovered. Never mind. It's nothing. Adrian stared at me, searching my face for a crack in the armor. I hid half my face behind the mug, acting as if I were perfectly composed. After a long moment, he finally spoke. I don't always have the time to take you on these runs. Go get ready. Down in the parking garage, my heart did a violent somersault the moment I saw his car. A Mercedes G-Wagon. All hard lines and matte black, perfect for his clinical, aggressive energy. Back at the airport, the curb must have been higher because I hadn't realized how tall the thing was. But now, standing next to it, I hesitated. I wasn't sure my leg could handle the climb. I stood by the passenger door, hesitating, my mind racing for an excuse. He pulled the door open and extended his arm to me. Is your leg still giving you trouble? I took a half step back, avoiding the physical contact. But the reality of the G-Wagon's height was undeniable. I needed leverage. I reached out and lightly rested my hand on his forearm. The scabs are healing, I'm fine. In this humidity, my leg felt like lead. I was caught in that awkward, mid-climb limbo when I felt a sudden, steady warmth against my waist. My whole body went rigid, the protest dying in my throat before it could reach my lips. He had already gripped my waist and hoisted me into the seat. Careful, he muttered. The contact was brief, but it left me breathless. Thanks, I whispered, scurrying deep into the leather interior, forbidding myself from leaning into that lingering heat. I turned my gaze to the window, my heart hammering painfully against my ribs. Walking into the IRM machinery warehouse was a sensory assault. Jackson, the floor manager, offered a string of sorries and watch your steps as he led the way. The place was a disaster zone. Outdated layout, crumbling infrastructure, and premium inventory tossed onto dusty shelves or left rotting on the floor. Forklifts swerved through dim corridors with zero regard for pedestrian lanes. It was a safety minefield. Jackson, seriously, I teased, trying to lighten the mood. You really need to look at our automated solutions. A forklift roared past us, far too close for comfort. Adrian's hand shot out, catching my shoulder and pulling me toward him. Jackson let out a booming laugh. I hear you, Claire, but I've got 1,000 fires to put out. For now, the chaos works. Adrian jumped in then. He didn't push the sales pitch or trash the current setup. Instead, he started talking shop about the specific parts on their shelves. Heaven knows how he does it, but within minutes, he had Jackson doubled over in laughter. My stilettos were a massive mistake for this terrain. I picked my way through the clutter, careful not to trip over a stray pallet. Adrian stayed within arm's reach the entire time, seemingly by accident, but always there. His warmth and that faint, familiar scent were the only things grounding me in this wreck of a building. Under Adrian's lead, the meeting was surgical. We reached a preliminary agreement in record time. Jackson went to see us out, but a frantic employee flagged him down. I waved him off and started walking slowly toward the exit with Adrian, snapping reference photos as I went. Let us go, Adrian urged, his voice tight. You've got enough for the proposal. I didn't stop. I've never seen a warehouse this ancient. It's a literal dinosaur. I drifted a few steps deeper into the shadows, trying to capture the sheer absurdity of one particularly messy corner. Adrian looked back at me, shaking his head with a sigh of forced patience. I almost hate to see them upgrade, I joked, finally feeling a spark of fun in the outing. The dinosaur era has a certain charm. Adrian gave me a look that suggested I'd lost my mind. Back to the car. Now. Just a few more. The words died in my throat as a massive shadow accompanied by a rush of cold air roared toward me. I didn't even have time to turn around before my heart simply stopped. This is it. Watch out. A violent force slammed into me, yanking me sideways. In that split second, the screech of metal, the bone-shaking impact, and a piercing, white-hot pain flooded my mind. Past and present collided. A forklift thundered through the spot where I'd been standing a millisecond before, kicking up a cloud of grit and acrid diesel exhaust. Claire. My vision flickered to black. I felt like I was falling into an abyss, the floor vanishing beneath me. I heard him screaming my name, the sound distant and distorted. A single thought clawed through the panic. I'm not dead. At least, not yet. But the old agony, the suffocating despair of the accident coiled around me like a rusted chain, tightening until I was shaking from head to toe. Claire, look at me. Do you hear me? Answer me. He was cupping my face in his hands, his voice a frantic roar. I lunged for him, my fingers knotting into the fabric of his shirt. Even breathing felt like a feat I could no longer master. Then, the ground vanished. Adrian swept me up into his arms. He was moving. He was running. He hauled me toward the car and shoved me into the back seat. He stayed there, hovering over me, his hand still framing my face. Claire, look at me. Deep breaths. Focus on me. His voice was vibrating, a tremor running through every word. I heard him, but I couldn't obey. Once again, I had lost command over my own body. Terrified, he pressed a heavy, desperate kiss to my forehead before crushing me against his chest. Baby, don't do this to me. Just breathe. Please. He pressed his face against mine, and I felt a sudden dampness against my skin. I wasn't crying. I didn't even have the strength for tears. It was his. The old memories were a relentless tide, battering against my brain. But this time was different. This time, I could hear his voice cutting through the noise. It was a lifeline, the only thing keeping me from being swept away. I clung to his shirt, my fingers white-knuckled, as if letting go meant falling forever. It took what felt like an eternity for my vision to sharpen. My fingers twitched. The roar of my heartbeat finally began to recede into a dull hum. I let out a long, shuddering breath, though my lungs were still trembling. I tightened my grip, my fingers meeting the warmth of his chest. It was solid. It was safe. He felt me move and pulled me even closer, his grip almost bruising. You're back. You're with me, aren't you, Claire? I could barely breathe under the weight of him. I tried to find the strength to push him away, to reclaim some space, but my muscles refused to cooperate. I gave up. Adrian, I whispered, my voice so thin it was barely a ghost of a sound. I'm not dead, right? He recoiled as if I struck him, his hands flying back to my face. He inspected me with a frantic, surgical intensity, as if I were a piece of delicate glass that had just taken a lethal blow. You're not. His voice broke, jagged and raw. I won't let anything happen to you. I never heard him sound like that, completely hoarse, stripped of all his corporate armor. I managed a weak, hollow smile. I already died once. You just weren't there to see it. He pressed his cheek against mine, his words a broken murmur. Never again. I swear, never again. In that moment, a sudden, inexplicable warmth flickered in my chest. My fingertips felt alive again. I gripped him tighter, a few stray tears finally escaping to trace the line of my jaw. You better mean that. I do. I swear to God, I do. His voice was a gravelly rasp as he leaned in, his lips finding mine. My spine went rigid, every instinct screamed at me to shove him away, to protect the wall I'd built. But my body betrayed me. I didn't push. I leaned in. The kiss started as a warm, tentative plea before shifting into something fierce and predatory. It was a desperate attempt to bridge a 2-year chasm in a single breath. I trembled in his arms, unable to tell if it was the lingering shock of the accident or the terrifying, beautiful agony of being found. Claire POV. I had no idea how much time had passed. Silence flooded the car. There was nothing left but the sound of our breath and a lingering heat that still clung to the air between us. I was still leaning into him, still held in his arms. As reality began to claw its way back, I froze. Fragments of what had just happened began to stitch themselves back together in my mind, like a broken film strip. The warehouse, the forklift, the darkness, the suffocation. And then, his voice. His hands. His kiss. My heart constricted violently. I brought my hands up, bracing them against his chest. That's enough. I can sit up on my own. My voice was thin, brittle. Adrian shifted, but he didn't let go immediately. His arms remained anchored around me. I couldn't bring myself to look at him, so I focused on a small, sharp crease in his shirt, my breath hitching as the tension tightened. Let go, I said again, in a low voice. Only then did he release me. His movements were agonizingly slow. Reluctant. I scrambled toward the side of the car, pressing my back against the door. Too close. Everything that had just happened was too close. Close enough to throw my heart rate into a chaotic, irregular beat. I looked down, trying to smooth out my clothes, but my fingers refused to cooperate. The silence in the car was excessive, heavy with the sound of our forced, controlled breathing. He didn't say a word, but I could feel it. His gaze was fixed on me, heavy enough to make the air feel like it was on the verge of exploding. About what happened I started, but my voice caught in my throat. It was a stress response. It had nothing to do with you. I know, he said softly. I paused, startled by his composure. No interrogation. No insistence. I risked a glance at him for a split second. His jaw was set, his eyes dark and unreadable. He look like the man who just lost control. Instead, he sat there as if nothing had happened at all. A strange emptiness opened up in my chest. Good. I nodded, turning my attention back to the window. Then let's go. The rain was still coming down. The glass was a blur of water, slicing the world outside into jagged, broken pieces. Just like that moment. I shouldn't have leaned into him. And I certainly shouldn't have responded to that kiss. My fingertips curled involuntarily. I balled my hands into fists and pressed them against my lap, terrified they might reach for him again if I didn't keep them pinned down. He didn't move. He stayed there in the back seat, watching me. After a few seconds, he finally spoke. Claire. Yeah? I didn't look at him. Is this the plan? You're just going to keep doing this? I frowned. What are you talking about? He let out a short, hollow laugh. Not a single word about it? My breath hitched for a second before I forced myself to recover. There's nothing to talk about. My voice was so calm it sounded foreign even to me. It was just. I stopped. I couldn't say the word. He finished it for me. An accident? I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it, either. I just kept my eyes glued to the window, watching the rain tear the world apart. He didn't push further. But I could feel it. That gaze of his, heavier and darker than it had been a moment ago. The drive back was a void of silence. We walked into the sales department one after the other, a measured distance between us. Just as I was about to turn toward my desk, I looked back and forced a smile. Thanks for taking me along today. I learned a lot. My tone was polite. The kind of hollow, professional courtesy that leaves no room for questions. He flinched, his pupils contracting sharply. He returned the gesture with a smile so faint it was practically non-existent, then turned and vanished into his office. Let it end here, I told myself. There can't be another chapter. I sank into my chair, keeping my head low. But the memories, the ones that had already breached the lockdown, kept surfacing, static charging my brain. We were supposed to be the happy ones. When I found that ring hidden in his drawer, I truly believed I was looking at our future. Then came that lavish dinner. The lighting was soft, and my heart was racing. But with one sentence, he shattered everything. The overseas branch. 5 years. All I remember was crying. It was ugly. I told him I didn't want the money. I just wanted him. My fingertips went cold. I balled my hands into fists, my gaze snapping to the screen on my desk. My breathing hitched, growing heavy. I didn't want to go down this road. But the memory chased me down anyway. That intersection. I was so close. Just a block away from his place, just minutes away from driving him to the airport. But then. My breath stopped. I clutched my chest, trying to steady my racing heart. Every lungful of air felt like a jagged blade. I looked up, forcing myself to stare at my colleagues buzzing around the office. It's over. Don't go back there. Work was the best cure. When you're drowning in tasks, the pain doesn't have room to breathe. I finished my client analysis, then headed down to the equipment department for a round of meetings. On my way back, I passed the financial department. I hesitated in the hallway for a split second. Then, someone walked out. My eyes lit up, and I called out to him. Ben, hey. Do you have a second? For you? Always. What's up? My commission, do you know when that's scheduled to drop? He grinned. The bonus? I'd have to check, but usually. It won't be that fast. A familiar voice cut him off. My spine stiffened. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Adrian. Once the contract is signed, the project implementation and follow-up maintenance take time, Adrian said, walking toward us with a slow, deliberate gait. Ben gave him a polite nod. Adrian continued, his voice dropping into a professional drone. Besides, delaying bonuses helps keep the sales team stable. I might not agree with the logic, but it is company policy. He spoke slowly, almost provocatively. Ben, standing between us, could already feel the temperature in the hallway plummeting. He looked at Adrian, then at me. Look, your director is right here. If you've got questions, he asked the man to ask. The guy bolted before I could say another word. I was left alone in the hall with Adrian. I glared at him, but he remained cold, utterly indifferent. This wasn't the man who had held me in the car, the man who had pulled me back from the edge of the abyss. My office. Now. He threw the words over his shoulder and walked away. I marched into his office and slammed the door behind me. What the hell was that? You're intentionally stalling my bonus to prevent turnover? He leaned against his desk, looking as though he'd been expecting the explosion. He arched an eyebrow. You're in sales, Claire. You should know the drill. It's standard protocol. He paused, his voice softening just a fraction. And besides, financial pulls the strings on the payouts. Not me. His sudden flash of tenderness caught me off guard, leaving me stunned. A few stray tears escaped, tracing hot paths down my cheeks. My mind went blank, my thoughts a tangled mess of static. What am I supposed to do? I murmured, staring at him. Am I really not going to get it? His Adam S. apple bobbed as he stepped toward me. You're that desperate to leave? His voice was cold hard as flint. I stepped back instinctively, my shoulders hitting the wall. He kept coming, closing the gap until the distance between us was no longer professional. It was intimate. Dangerous. I need that money, I said, looking up at him. My voice was fractured, my breath hitching in my throat. His gaze darkened further, turning into a deep, unreadable abyss. Give me a reason. The tears were coming faster now. I wiped them away with a messy, frantic swipe of my hand and glared at him. You'll never know. Not in a million years. His hand tightened slowly, the pad of his thumb grazing my chin. Then try me, he rasped, his voice so low it sounded like it was being dragged from his throat. Let us see if you can actually manage to get away this time. My chest constricted. Then, just as suddenly, he stepped back, acting as though nothing had happened. Get out. I froze for a second. He had already turned his back to me, burying every trace of emotion in the rigid line of his shoulders. The tension coiling in my gut slowly began to unravel. I walked toward the door, but just as my hand brushed the cold metal of the handle, his voice dropped behind me heavy and final. Claire. I stopped. This time, he said, still refusing to look back. I'm not letting you go. Claire POV. A few more days drifted by, slow and measured. Despite Adrian's heavy parting words, he hadn't called me in for any more private talks. During the sales meetings, he stopped singling me out. Everything felt like it had reverted to a state of normalcy as if nothing had ever happened. Except for the gaze. I could still feel it, heavy and recurring, trailing me when I wasn't looking. And then there were the proposals. I had revised them several times based on his feedback. But the final version sent to the clients always bore his final polish. He'd gone through and refined the last draft himself. The result? Client feedback was better than it had ever been. But he'd said he wouldn't let me go. And he meant it. He was a man of relentless perseverance, a hunter who never lost sight of his mark. That was why this recent bout of peace didn't put me at ease. It felt like the eye of a storm. I needed a way out. Another rainy day. I had nearly been late this morning because I couldn't catch an Uber for the life of me. Getting a ride in this weather was a nightmare. I knew the drill. So, after the clock struck 5, I took my time organizing my files. I wanted to wait out the rush hour. One by one, my colleagues filtered out. The light in Adrian's office remained on. Soon, I was the only one left in the bullpen. I opened the app and waited, but the minutes ticked by with no one accepting my request. Outside, the downpour only intensified. The door to Adrian's office opened. I immediately busied myself at my computer, pretending to be buried in work. He walked straight toward me and stopped at the edge of my desk. "No car today?" "No." My phone screen was still glowing, the app interface exposed. I clicked it off, but it was too late. He looked toward the window. "I'll drive you. In this weather, you'll never get a car." "I'm fine, thank you." I practically sprinted out of the office. The moment I hit the elevator, I jammed the close door button. He didn't follow. And I let out a long, ragged breath of relief. But my luck ran out the moment I reached the lobby. I stood there for 30 minutes, watching the "no cars available" icon mock me. I bumped the fare to a 3x surge, and finally, a driver bit. I watched the little car icon on my screen with bated breath as it crawled toward my street. Then, just as it reached the corner, the icon vanished. Damn it. The driver had cancelled. The rain turned into a literal wall of water. I leaned against a marble pillar in the lobby, staring up at the ceiling in defeat. My phone buzzed. It was Adrian. I didn't want to pick up. I let it ring until it timed out, but he called again instantly. "Fine. The office is closed, boss. If you want work done, it'll have to wait until tomorrow. You still haven't caught a ride, have you?" His voice sounded almost warm against the backdrop of the icy rain. I stayed silent. "Meet me at the front." The line went dead. He didn't give me a second to argue. A moment later, his car pulled up under the overhang. "Thanks, but I actually just found one." "Stop being stubborn." Before I could react, his hand hooked under my thighs and he hoisted me up with one arm. "Let go of me." I scrambled in a panic, but I was more terrified of slipping from his grip. I didn't dare scream. The last thing I needed was to draw a crowd. He didn't let go until he'd shoved me into the passenger seat. I pushed him away the second I was landed. 2 years, and you're still this headstrong." He grabbed the seatbelt, leaning across my body to click it into place. For that heartbeat, his face was only inches from mine. Too close. Close enough to feel the heat of his breath. I pressed my spine against the leather, my heart hammering so hard it was painful. He didn't speak, and he didn't move away. He stared into my eyes, and I watched the coldness in his gaze slowly ignite into a slow burn fire. I don't know how long we stayed frozen like that. Not until my fingers twitched uncontrollably did I finally avert my eyes and whisper, "Fine, just drive." My voice was so soft it was barely a breath. He still didn't move. His hand remained braced against the seat beside me, his breathing mingling with mine. He watched me with that look, the look I knew all too well. The way he used to look at me during all those nights, 2 years ago. My heart constricted violently. Instinctively, I jerked my head to the side. "Drive," I said. This time, my voice was louder, sharper. Almost as if I were pleading with him. He stared at me for a few long seconds, his Adam's apple bobbing slowly. Finally, he pulled back. The car door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. The car glided into the curtain of rain, and the silence between us became absolute. But in that moment, I knew. Something had already spiraled out of control. The 30-minute drive felt like an eternity. As we finally approached my neighborhood, I cleared my throat. "You can just drop me at the curb up ahead." He didn't respond. I wanted to remind him, but the words died in my throat. Fortunately, he eventually wrenched the steering wheel and pulled over. He muttered a curt "stay put" before opening his umbrella and stepping out into the storm. I pushed my door open to find a massive umbrella already shielding me. Before I could move, his arm hooked around me again, hoisting me up in one fluid motion. "Put me down, I can walk." He acted as if he were stone deaf, striding through the rain with long, purposeful steps. He didn't set me back on my feet until we were safely inside the lobby. Floor? My heart sank, but I managed to whisper. Fifth. The elevator door slid open, and he followed me in. I wanted to tell him to stay back, but the words wouldn't come. He stood so close. In the damp chill of the rainy day, the heat radiating from his body was impossible to ignore. Finally, I reached my door and pulled out my keys. I hesitated, glancing at him. He showed no intention of leaving. I'm home. Thanks. I left the rest of the sentence hanging. He was silent for a moment, his voice dropping into a low, gravelly register. I want to talk. Privately. My heart hammered against my ribs. I bit my lower lip, weighing the options. Fine. Come in. We had to clear the air eventually. We never got a proper goodbye 2 years ago. Maybe today was the day to finally finish what we started. He stepped inside and scanned my apartment. I gestured for him to sit on the sofa and grabbed a pack of tissues. Your pant legs are soaked. I pulled out a few sheets. Do you want to do it, or should I? His attention seemed anchored to the space around him to my life. He gave a distracted reply. You do it. The fabric was drenched. I folded the tissues, trying to blot the water. When he'd carried me from the car, he'd kept the umbrella positioned perfectly over me, leaving nothing for himself. This isn't working, I said, stopping. I'll get the hairdryer. Don't. I didn't wait for him to finish. I was already gone. A moment later, the whir of the dryer filled the room, a welcome distraction from the awkward silence. My thoughts were a chaotic mess. He used to do this for me. He'd dry my hair, inch by inch, and sometimes he'd lean in and press a kiss to the back of my neck. His hand clamped over mine, cutting through my reverie. Claire, he said softly. Forget the dryer. I froze. He took the dryer from my hand. I moved to grab it back, but then I saw the fire in his eyes. I looked down, my heart rate skyrocketing. His fingertips traced the line of my cheek before settling on my chin. His thumb began to graze my lower lip. Stop keeping me at arm's length, okay? His voice was hoarse, fractured, heavy with years of suppressed emotion. Lost. I nodded. Then immediately shook my head. My mind was a blur. He moved closer, his hand sliding around my waist, warm, powerful, and certain. Why hasn't your leg healed yet? He asked. How many more things are you hiding from me? My spine went rigid. I didn't know how to answer. Then, a kiss fell softly against my lips. Talk to me. His voice was achingly tender. His lips were warm, and this time I didn't pull away. I was too hungry for him. Starved. Even. So I met him halfway. We kissed with a frantic, desperate greed, like two people who had been waiting a lifetime for this moment. His hand tangled in the hair at the back of my head, anchoring me, deepening the kiss until my breath was a jagged mess and my skin felt like it was on fire. Our tongues met, and every ounce of my resolve began to crumble, piece by piece. Claire. He rasped against my lips, his voice a low, broken murmur. Don't leave me again. Not ever. My mind was a haze. A small, involuntary moan escaped my throat. I didn't even know if it was an answer or just a surrender. Shaking, he lifted me, pulling me onto his lap. He moved with a frantic energy, stealing the air from my lungs, and I felt my heart beginning to liquefy. I could feel the hard, unmistakable ridge of his arousal against me. My own body responded instantly, a treacherous heat blooming deep inside. Panic flared in my chest for a second. I gripped his arms, my knuckles white. He kissed me harder, his hand tracing the line of my thigh, moving upward with a slow, deliberate touch. Waves of warmth surged through me, and for a moment, I felt myself starting to melt into him. But the moment his hand brushed higher, I went rigid. Instinctively, I slammed my hand over his, pinning it down. A phantom pain sharp and cold seemed to radiate from the scar on my leg. My breathing stopped dead. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over me. Don't touch me. My voice was a trembling wreck. I shoved him back with everything I had and scrambled to my feet, more like a hunted animal than a woman in love. He blinked, stunned. Claire. Stay back. I recoiled, every breath a stinging needle in my lungs. I couldn't look at him. I knew that if I stayed in that room for one more second, I would shatter completely. I reached for the door, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip the handle. Leave, I choked out, the sob rising in my throat. Just go. He stood there, frozen. He looked like he wanted to say anything, but the words never came. After an agonizing silence, he finally whispered a single word. Okay. The second the door clicked shut, the apartment felt cavernous. Hollow. I leaned my back against the wood, paralyzed. I didn't move until I heard the distant chime of the elevator down the hall. Ding. Only then did I slide down to the floor, the tears finally breaking through, uncontrollable and hot. Claire POV. I drifted in and out of sleep all night. The locked box of memories had finally cracked wide open, and everything inside the joy, the agony spilled out, screaming and thrashing in my mind. It wasn't until the alarm jolted me awake that I realized my face was soaked. I threw myself together and headed for the office, only realizing once I was behind the wheel that my eyes were swollen like peaches. I'd been so out of it I hadn't even thought to use a cold compress. Adrian wasn't in yet when I arrived. I hurried to my desk to prep for the day. Emily poked her head over the partition. You're heading out today? Client visits. 2 of them. I logged the itinerary into the tracking system. Are you trying to kill yourself? She grabbed my arm, her eyes scanning my face. You're running yourself ragged, Claire. I gave her a hollow smile. I need the money, Emily. Not at this price. She looked at me with genuine worry. I patted her shoulder. I'm fine. I'll be in surgery soon enough. Don't worry about me. Without another word, I hurried out of the office. The 2 clients were a 3-hour drive apart. Usually, I'd only hit one per day. But today, I couldn't stomach the thought of being in the same building as Adrian. We had crossed a line last night, and I had no idea how to face him yet. Besides, the clock was ticking. I'd already blown past the doctor's deadline for removing the hardware in my leg. And the pain was flaring up with terrifying frequency. I was barely on the highway when Adrian's call came through. Claire, I didn't approve your itinerary. Turn around and get back to the office. Now. Sorry, I'm already on the road. For safety reasons, please stop calling me while I'm driving. I was right to leave early. I let out a long breath of relief and switched my phone off. By the time I'd finished both visits, evening had settled in. I'd skipped lunch to make time for the drive. Sitting in the car, I organized my sales logs and uploaded the site photos to the system. The second I turned my phone back on, it screamed for attention. Where are you? Adrian's voice was a low simmer of repressed rage. Tasks complete. I'm heading home. Are you out of your mind? He snapped, cutting me off. I didn't argue. I didn't say anything at all. After a heavy silence, he finally spoke again. Go get some dinner. And from now on, you don't step foot out of that office without my personal sign-off. I was too exhausted to fight. I hung up and shut the phone off again. My right leg felt like lead. I'd pushed it way past its limit today. I started the engine and rubbed the aching muscle. Come on, babe, I whispered to my leg. Just 2 more hours and we're home. Just hold on. Please. 2 hours later, I climbed out of the car, my legs feeling like cotton. I realized then that I'd missed dinner, too. But I didn't care. All I wanted was to vanish into my bed. But when the elevator door slid open, I froze. Adrian was leaning against my door. A takeout bag hung from the handle. When he saw me, he straightened up, his face as dark as a thundercloud. My heart sank. He was the last person I wanted to see, but there was nowhere left to hide. I dragged my numb leg toward him. The hallway lights, usually so dim, felt blindingly bright. Evening. The greeting sounded hollow even to my own ears. Have you eaten? His voice was ice. No. I reached for the bag and unlocked the door. Is this for me? It was sushi from the place I used to love. I hadn't ordered from there once since we broke up. I gave the bag a small lift. Thanks. Adrian pushed past me into the apartment, taking the bag from my hand. He began laying out the containers on the table, one by one, as if he were the master of the space. Come and eat, he commanded. I drifted to the sofa and collapsed, curling myself into a ball. Too tired. I'll eat tomorrow. No. You're eating now. He grabbed my arm, hauling me upright. I shoved him away, my frustration boiling over. Leave me alone. I'm exhausted. I just want to sleep. He tightened his grip on my arm, his voice dropping into a low, suppressed growl. Who told you to run yourself into the ground like this? What the hell are you playing at, Claire? I shot him a look of pure resentment. I need the money. But you're the one holding my commission hostage. His tone grew colder, harder. You know there's a protocol. I'm not doing this on purpose. He took a sharp breath, forcing his voice to steady. Are you in such a hurry to get paid just so you can run away from me again? The pressure of his fingers on my arm was beginning to throb. My throat felt thick, raw with unshed emotion. Suddenly, the tears broke. Adrian. I choked out, a sob racking my chest. I'm scared. I was scared that my leg wouldn't hold out much longer. Scared that after the surgery, things might actually get worse. I was terrified of every single maybe. He seemed to flinch. The next second, he pulled me violently into his arms. I could feel his chest heaving, his breath hitching as he shook. Don't be scared, Claire. I've got you. I froze, my spine turning to stone. Get away from me, I wailed, the dam finally breaking. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I don't want to see you. I fought to push him off, but he only held on tighter, pinning me against him. Don't do this, Claire, please, don't do this. I didn't have the strength to fight him anymore. I slumped against his chest, using what little energy I had left to let the tears flow. He pressed his face against mine, his skin grazing mine in a slow, desperate rhythm. Claire, I'm sorry. I've wanted to say that for so long. I'm so sorry. What's an apology worth, my voice hoarse. He went silent, but his arms didn't loosen an inch. Nothing, he whispered. It's worth nothing. But I still have to say it. He was so warm. He carried that scent I had once been obsessed with, and my frozen body was starved for that heat. My arms found their way around his neck, greedily drinking in his warmth. He cupped my face, his breathing heavy and ragged. Claire, I've made a lot of mistakes. I know that. But I'm not letting you walk away again. I startled, my instinct telling me to recoil, but my body was already meeting him halfway. His lips were hot, urgent, like a man who had been starving for years. His tongue surged into my mouth, claiming me, and my body went limp as my breath came in heavy, jagged gasps. He moved down, his kisses tracing a path along my neck and my collarbone, setting a fire deep under my skin. Did you miss me? His voice vibrated against my ear, his teeth grazing my earlobe. A surge of heat pulled in my lower abdomen. I turned my face away, refusing to answer. He caught my jaw, forcing me back to face him. I know you hate me, he rasped. But I haven't spent a single day without thinking about you. A lone tear tracked down the corner of my eye. He paused, kissing the salt away before finding my lips again. This time, with a devastating tenderness. Then, he lifted me carefully, almost reverently, and laid me down on the bed. I bit my lower lip, the battle between my fading logic and my primal hunger raging in my chest. I wanted to say no, but I couldn't fight the craving anymore. Claire, may I? His voice was pure velvet. His light blue eyes were swimming with a raw, undeniable affection. Fragments of our life from 2 years ago collided in my mind, leaving me dazed. A few more tears slipped from the corners of my eyes. Adrian, I whispered. I want you. His breath hitched, a visible tremor running through him. He traced a path of kisses downward, his mouth finding my nipples, my abdomen, and finally, the space between my thighs. I gasped for air, my fingers tangling deep in his hair. He teased me with his tongue. His fingers sliding inside me with a slow, tentative probe before finding a rhythm that left me undone. I cried out as the heat began to pool and build, a frantic pressure coiling tight. As his pace quickened, his finger hit exactly the right spot. And a firework exploded behind my eyelids. My body arched, trembling violently, as the heat shattered and pulsed through every nerve ending. All that was left of me was the sound of my own heavy, ragged breathing. But then, his fingers found the scar on my right leg. His lips followed, pressing a soft, lingering kiss against the jagged skin. Claire, what is this? Every muscle in my body seized. I rolled onto my side, trying to shield the scar from his view. "Don't, Adrian. I want you right now." I pulled him close, but a deep, hollow sadness settled in my gut. He'd found it. He finally knew. I closed my eyes, unable to meet the burning intensity of his gaze. I was terrified I wouldn't be able to hold myself together. He shifted his weight and sank into me. The sheer fullness of him flooded me, but it was accompanied by a ghost of a dull ache. My body recoiled instinctively. "God, Claire, relax. You're crushing me," he groaned, leaning in to kiss me with a devastating gentleness. The tears threatened to spill over again. I pressed my hands against his chest. "Adrian." I didn't know what to say. I didn't have the words. His kisses were slow, patient. "We can stop," he whispered, his hands trembling where they braced him on either side of me. "It's not too late to stop." He was being so good to me. Too good. At that moment, I refused to let the past or the future in. I closed my eyes and wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him closer. "Adrian, don't stop." He let out a low, guttural groan. "Damn it, Claire. I'm losing it. Baby." He hooked his hands under my hips, his thrusts turning powerful and urgent. It was a collision of suppression and raw, desperate hunger. We stayed locked together until the world dissolved into a blur of shaking limbs and frantic gasps. He pressed a kiss into my hair as we came down. "Claire, you're mine. You've always been mine." I buried my face in his chest and said nothing. Adrian POV. I opened my eyes to the morning light. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't want to get up. Claire was curled against me, tucked into the curve of my body. A stray lock of hair lay across her face, dancing in the morning breeze until she pouted in her sleep. I tucked it back, my fingers lingering as they brushed her cheek. Her long, curled lashes fluttered, and a faint frown creased her brow. Seeing her again, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't the same girl from 2 years ago. Back then, she wore her heart on her sleeve. She was all tears and laughter. And her entire world revolved around loving me. That was why I hesitated when the firm offered me that overseas position. I knew she wouldn't be able to handle it. But I wanted to give her the world. I knew she'd cry, and at the time, I thought that was childish. I was a man, of course I was going to choose my career. Besides, 5 years was nothing. I'd be back and we'd pick up right where we left off. That night at the restaurant, she had dressed up, looking breathtaking. I thought she knew what I was going to say. I thought she'd accept it gracefully. Instead, she cried until her heart broke and walked away without looking back. She blocked me on everything. I tried calling from different numbers, but she never picked up. It hurt like hell. 3 years of love isn't something you just walk away from. But I still boarded that flight. The whole way to the airport, I kept expecting her to jump out from some corner, smiling and telling me she'd wait. But she never showed. Not even in the final minute before the gate slammed shut. I thanked God for this reunion, for the chance to hold her again. But even though she seemed so present last night moaning my name over and over, I still felt like she was miles away. So far, it was like we were on different planets. In the dawn light, I tightened my grip on her waist, pulling her flesh against my chest. I couldn't bring myself to let go. I was terrified that if I did, she'd vanish into thin air, and I'd never find her again. I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. The woman she had become fascinated me even more than the girl she used to be. She still had shadows of her old self, but she had grown into exactly the kind of woman I desired. When she was focused on a proposal, or when we were head-to-head arguing over project details, I couldn't keep my eyes off her. But I didn't understand. She used to play tennis with me, she was actually damn good at it. Now, it was like she was suffering from a sickness that never quite healed. Even getting in and out of my car seemed like a struggle. I thought of that scar on her thigh. I had kissed it last night. Even in the dim light, I could feel how jagged and angry it was. She seemed so intentional about keeping me away from it. Fine. I'd find a way to figure it out eventually. She stirred then, her eyes slowly blinking open. "Morning, babe," I whispered. She buried her face in my chest. "I'm exhausted. I hit 2 clients yesterday, and then you kept going, over and over." I laughed softly, kissing her temple. I was actually holding back. She gave my waist a sharp pinch. Go to hell. I still have to go to work today and keep slaving away for you. Seeing her in a good mood, I let my hand rest on her thigh, slowly sliding upward. Babe, what's this? She went rigid in absolute, physical freeze. Her breath hitched, then stopped altogether. She swiped my hand away with a frantic sharpness. It's nothing, she snapped. Just an old scar. The mattress shifted, and the warmth beside me vanished as she scrambled out of bed. You should leave. Her voice was no longer soft. It was encased in a layer of permafrost. I sat up, stunned by the sudden whiplash. What happened? Look, if I overstepped, I take it back. I'm sorry. She ignored me, already grabbing her work clothes and retreating into the bathroom. When she came out, she was fully armored in her professional gear. Just go, Adrian. Whatever this was, whatever we were doing, it ends here. Her eyes were twin shards of ice. But behind the frost, there was a raw, jagged streak of pain. I reached out, my hands open, wanting nothing more than to pull her back into my space. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried into your past. Claire, I won't ask again. I promise. She recoiled, taking 2 steps back to avoid my touch. Adrian, you really need to leave. Now. Are you just exhausted, Claire? Is that it? Get out. The look in her eyes sent a phantom chill straight down my spine. I gathered my things and left her apartment. A crushing sense of defeat, the worst I'd felt in 2 years, hit me like a physical blow. I went home, changed, and dragged myself to the office. By the time I'd waded through the morning's fires, the bullpen was full. Claire was there, too. On the surface, she looked composed, identical to her usual professional self. I wanted to call her into my office, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Later, I told myself. Give her some space. But when I finally looked up from my desk and glanced through the glass partition, her seat was empty. My heart sank. I pulled up the tracking system immediately. She was out on client visits again. Another unapproved trip. I dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. I leaned back in my chair, a cold sense of dread pooling in my gut. She was desperate for that bonus, yet there was nothing expensive in her apartment. Why? The image of that scar flashed in my mind again. I turned to my computer and typed a description of the mark. The AI's response flickered onto the screen. Likely a surgical scar from the internal fixation of an intramedullary nail. My vision blurred, the room suddenly dimming as the world tilted on its axis. An intramedullary nail. How was that possible? My heart began to throb against my ribs, a violent, irregular beat. I felt a phantom, sympathetic ache in the exact same spot on my own thigh. Outside, a light rain began to fall, streaking the window in gray lines. It hit me then she was terrified of driving in the rain. The realization felt like a sledgehammer to my chest. Just as I was reaching for my phone to find any way to track her down, the administrative secretary knocked and walked in. Adrian, there's an emergency meeting. You're expected in the conference room. I looked at her with pure impatience. What's the agenda? Why wasn't this scheduled? It's a last-minute executive session called by the president. I'm sorry, sir. I had no choice but to stand up, but the anxiety was clawing at my throat. A nerve was twitching, pulling at me. I walked over to Emily's desk. Emily, get a hold of Claire. Now. She looked up, startled. Did something go wrong with a client? I hesitated, my voice tight. It's important. Just get her back here as fast as you can. The meeting was an agonizing, endless drone. I checked my watch every 30 seconds, my eyes glued to my silent phone. Emily hadn't buzzed me back. When it was finally my turn to brief the president on the sales forecast, I was mid-sentence when the heavy conference doors slammed open. Emily was standing there, gasping for air, her face pale. Adrian, it's Claire. My stomach dropped. I was on my feet before she could finish. What is it? A car accident. She's at the hospital. Excuse me, everyone. I have to handle this. I didn't wait for an answer. I was already moving toward the door when the CFO cut me off. Send someone else, Adrian. There's no reason for you to be personally involved in a staffer's fender bender. I turned, looking at him with a gaze so cold it stopped him mid-sentence. I'm sorry, but I don't share your capacity for indifference. Emily had to break into a jog just to keep pace with me as I strode toward the elevators. She called me, Adrian. She said she hit a guardrail. She sounded terrified. But she specifically told me not to tell you. I didn't know what to do. You too. We stepped into the elevator. I hit the button for the garage and turned on her. Tell me the truth. What's wrong with her leg? Emily's lower lip trembled. Claire, she clamped her mouth shut, her eyes darting away. I can't. I promised. I crowded into her space, my eyes flashing with a dangerous, icy light. Why the hell can't you say it? Do you want to be the reason she ends up in a grave? Emily flinched, backing up until she hit the elevator wall. I would never hurt her, she shouted, her voice cracking. When that bastard nearly got her killed, I was the only one who stayed by her side. She cut herself off, her eyes widening in sheer terror as if she'd just leaked a state secret. My heart gave a violent, sickening lurch. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. What bastard? My jaw was so tight the words felt like they were being squeezed through my teeth. Emily turned deathly pale, her hand instinctively clutching the handrail for support. Claire, she was hit by a semi 2 years ago. She almost died, Adrian. The pain in my chest intensified, a sharp, suffocating pressure. I struggled to keep my voice steady. 2 years ago? When? Give me a date. She said, she was on her way to find her boyfriend. She wanted to say goodbye to him before his flight. I closed my eyes. Hard. The truth pierced through me like 1,000 needles, each one finding a nerve. The elevator door slid open. I didn't wait for Emily, and ran for my car like a madman. I slammed the car into gear and floored it, weaving through the traffic with a reckless desperation. I had known, deep down, that this was all connected to me. But I never imagined I was this unforgivable. Adrian POV. The doctor flipped through the lab reports, a faint scowl deepening the lines on his forehead. A minor head trauma, but that's the least of her worries. He pointed to the X-ray clipped to the light box. This hardware, it should have been pulled 6 months ago. She's pushed it way past the limit. My stomach dropped. What are the consequences of waiting this long? It fuses with the marrow, he explained clinically. It makes the extraction significantly more difficult. Recovery won't be easy either. He added, almost as an afterthought, she's lucky she didn't refracture it today. Looking at a leg full of steel like this, she's damn lucky to be walking at all. I stopped hearing him after that. Every piece of the puzzle finally clicked into place. I knew why she was so desperate for those bonuses. I knew exactly what she meant when she said she was scared. The pain in my chest was so sharp I could barely draw air. I walked out of the office in a daze and found my way back to Claire. She was in the observation room, finally asleep from the sheer exhaustion of the trauma. Her breathing was steady, her brow slightly furrowed. This morning, looking at her in her sleep had filled me with bliss. Now, there was only agony. Only a crushing, soul-deep shame. I took her hand in mine, rubbing it gently, trying to imagine the hell she'd endured these past 2 years. No. I couldn't. I didn't dare. I had seen the videos and photos of these surgeries online, the kind that make your skin crawl and your stomach turn. And that was her reality. She had lived through it, and because of the delay, she had to face it all over again. I finally understood why she never picked up, no matter how many different numbers I tried. While I was chasing the high of my career and the thrill of a promotion, she was drowning in pain, fighting just to survive. And every bit of it, every single scar was on me. Claire stirred, her consciousness drifting back to the surface. I tightened my grip on her hand. Claire? How do you feel? My throat was so thick with emotion it felt like I was swallowing glass. She didn't open her eyes. A single, weak word escaped her lips. Hurts. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was being torn apart. I pressed a kiss to the back of her hand. Don't be scared. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. She blinked slowly, shifting her weight until she could see me. I tried to smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. I managed only a jagged, pathetic twitch of the lips. I pulled her hand against my cheek, desperate for the contact. but she slowly, deliberately, pulled her hand away. Her voice was like a winter wind. "What are you doing here?" She closed her eyes again, refusing to give me even a second glance. My breath caught in my throat. 1,000 apologies were fighting to get out, but I couldn't find the strength to voice them. Finally, I managed one broken sentence. "Claire. I know everything. I'm so sorry." She turned away from me, facing the wall. It felt like an eternity before she spoke. "Does sorry change anything?" The voice was faint, but it hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. My breathing turned shallow. My mind was a mess. "I know it doesn't. I know. But, please, just give me a chance to make it right." My voice was trembling, raw and unsteady. I watched her back rise and fall with each breath. Silence stretched between us, suffocating and heavy. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "Adrian, your whole life, it's always been about what you want to do. You just act. You never once stopped to ask me what I thought." I flinched. "I know. I handled it poorly," I rasped. "But I did it for us. Truly. You wanted the promotion. You wanted the fast track. And you signed that contract without even mentioning it to me. To you, I was just someone who needed to be notified after the fact, right?" Her voice began to shake. "If it had been something small, I would have moved on. I'd forgiven you 1,000 times before. But that decision, it was 5 years of my life. Didn't my opinion count for anything at all?" My hands tightened on the edge of the bed, my knuckles turning a ghostly white. "I'm sorry, Claire. I wanted to give you a better life. That's all I ever wanted." "That's what you wanted, Adrian. Not me." I tried to argue, to defend myself, but the words died in my throat. Because she was right. And it was the truth. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I smoothed her long hair. My breathing was a jagged mess. "I know. I made that choice. And if I hadn't left..." I stopped. The rest of the sentence hit a wall. I couldn't bring myself to say it. She kept her back to me, but I saw her shoulders begin to shake. I knew she was crying. And I knew with a soul-crushing certainty that I had no right to comfort her. After a long, suffocating silence, she took a few shaky breaths to steady herself. "It's too late for what-ifs. The accident happened. Every bit of love I had for you, every hope I held on to. It was all crushed to pieces in that crash." "Don't say that, Claire," I rasped, my voice cracking. "You have no idea what these 2 years have been like for me. I was saved, sure," she said, her voice suddenly, terrifyingly calm as if she were narrating someone else's tragedy. "But every day, looking at my broken body, I lost the will to keep going. While I was hovering between life and death, you were over there, weren't you? Living a full, meaningful life?" "No, I wasn't," I choked out, the tears finally breaking through. "I called you every single day from different numbers. For a solid month. I thought you were just angry. I thought, eventually, you'd pick up." She let out a short, mocking laugh. "My phone was smashed to splinters in the wreck, Adrian. I was lying in a hospital bed like a stitched-together ragdoll. And the only thing I thought about every day was how to die." She let out a sharp, wet sniffle. "Until I met Emily. She was the one who taught me how to live for myself." I moved around the bed and dropped to my knees in front of her. My trembling fingers reached out to brush away her tears. "Claire, I know I messed up. But it wasn't supposed to end like this." I was sobbing now, the sound raw and ugly. We were supposed to make it to the end." She closed her eyes, more tears escaping to track down her cheeks. "You still think you were right, don't you, Adrian?" She gave a small, tearful smile. "You think the plan was perfect, and the outcome was just bad luck." She opened her eyes then, her gaze clear and devastatingly firm. "Go away. I don't want to see you." The room seemed to dim. I gripped the bed frame, my knuckles aching, desperate not to let go. But she turned away again, giving me nothing but her back. I let out a long, ragged sigh and forced myself to stand. My legs felt like lead. Before I left, I reached out one last time, wanting to touch her hair. My hand hovered in the air for a few seconds, trembling, before I curled my fingers into a fist and pulled back. The walk to the door was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Standing at the threshold, I looked back one last time. Claire, do you hate me? She was silent for a heartbeat. Then, softly. The love is gone, Adrian. Why would I bother with hate? My vision blurred. I stumbled out of the observation room, my head spinning, and nearly collided with someone in the hallway. I looked up. It was Emily. She was staring at me, her expression shifting from confusion to absolute, horrified disbelief. Adrian? You're the prick? You're the ex-boyfriend? I could only nod, the weight of it finally breaking me. She let out a cold, sharp laugh. Well, congratulations, Mr. Director. You really outdid yourself. She brushed past me, heading for the room. She was right. I was a bastard. A selfish, arrogant prick. But I wasn't done. I was going to win Claire back. Even if she hated me. Even if she didn't want me. I wasn't letting her go a second time. Claire POV. Despite telling myself I never wanted to see Adrian again, he kept showing up. He was shameless, appearing at my bedside the second he clocked out every single day. We existed in a heavy, pressurized silence. He didn't speak. I didn't offer a word. When surgery day finally arrived, the quiet was replaced by the clinical hum of the hospital. As I waited for the nurses to wheel me into the anesthesia suite, a familiar panic began to claw at my chest. It was going to be another bloody, invasive ordeal. The post-op pain. I didn't know if I had the strength to survive it one more time. That fear had been a low-frequency hum in the back of my mind for months. Now, it leaped out like a midnight specter, flaunting itself right in front of my face. Adrian burst through the doors, his breath coming in ragged hitches. He grabbed my hand, managed to choke out my name Claire and then went silent, his voice failing him. I kept my face turned away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a glance. His breathing was a mess. It took him a long moment before he could steady himself enough to speak. I know your pain is my fault, he said, his voice low and thick. But this time I'm not letting you face it alone. He pulled my palm against his cheek, leaning into it. Don't be scared. I'll be right here waiting when you come out. I closed my eyes, desperate to hide the tears that were threatening to spill. All the agony, all the deep-seated resentment in that moment, it all felt dangerously close to crumbling. I hated myself for being so easily moved, but those years of suffering and isolation had been so damn bitter. I was defenseless against even the smallest shred of his warmth. The nurses arrived, checking my name and bed number before prep began. I pulled my hand back, reassembling my mask of cold indifference. I didn't know if I still loved him. That was a question I hadn't dared to touch, not even after we reunited. I decided not to think at all. Just like 2 years ago, I let fate make the call for me. The anesthesia room was bone-chillingly cold. The only sounds were the sterile clinking of metal instruments and the doctor's rhythmic questioning. Fear seized me again, tearing at my resolve. I was terrified of the pain. I was terrified I'd never wake up. I was shaking so hard I had to ball my hands into fists. His voice played on a loop in my head. I'll be right here waiting when you come out. Then came the sharp, searing sting in my spine. And the world went black. I felt like I'd been asleep for a century. When I finally drifted toward the surface, the lights were blinding. Someone was peeling back my eyelids, talking to me in a muffled voice. Then I was moving, the gurney rolling over the floor. Through the haze, I thought I heard Adrian. He was gently squeezing my hand, telling me I was brave. Then, I dipped back into sleep. In the dreams, he was there, holding my hand with a devastating tenderness. He whispered I'm sorry into my ear over and over, a mantra of regret. I lost count of how many times he said it. I only remember the sound of him choking back a sob. When I opened my eyes for real, his face was the first thing I saw. His light blue eyes were shining with a mix of relief and unshed tears. Claire? You're awake? His voice was a gravelly rasp. I stared at him, feeling a bit numb. After all, during the last few surgeries, I'd been completely alone from start to finish. I'd always woken up to an icy, empty room. No comfort, no one to ask how I was. I lingered in the silence for a moment, feeling a strange, unexpected spark of warmth in my chest. Is it over? I managed to ask. It's over. He gently smoothed the stray hairs away from my face. My leg, will it still hurt? No, he choked out, a tear finally escaping. Never again. I promise. The hardware? I said I wanted to keep it. I have it. I'm holding on to it for you. A few drops of warm liquid hit the back of my hand. I could hear his breathing, fractured and uneven. Claire, he said, struggling to maintain his composure. Seeing that piece of steel. I finally realized how catastrophically I messed everything up. I stayed silent, listening to the tremor in his voice. I wanted to give you the world. I thought I'd planned everything perfectly. I even had the engagement ring ready. I thought you'd be happy that night. I thought you'd say yes. The images from that night collided in my mind. A chaotic blur of fragments. The soft glow of the restaurant lights. The sparkle of the champagne. The way I had painstakingly applied my makeup, feeling beautiful, feeling hopeful. He had taken my hand in his. I was so sure, so utterly convinced that he was about to propose. But instead. The overseas branch. 5 years. The time will fly by. I had sat there, watching him map out my entire life without a single question. And then, the brutal impact. The blinding, white-hot agony. I was waiting for a proposal, I rasped, my voice trembling with 2 years of suppressed rage. And you used that beautiful, elaborate setting just to throw me away. I wrenched my hand back from his grip, pulling the hospital blanket over my head to hide. I was shaking violently, every breath felt like a serrated blade in my chest. Adrian stood over me, his voice a gravelly ghost of its former self. I'm sorry. Claire, I am so goddamn sorry. I see it now. I didn't factor you into anything. I gave you nothing but a piece of steel in your leg and a lifetime of trauma. Enough. I cut him off, reaching out to coldly pry his fingers away. Saying this now doesn't dull the pain, not even a little. And don't think for a second that this makes me forgive you. He froze, standing by the bed, looking uncharacteristically lost, stripped of the corporate armor that usually defined him. I stared at him, my voice barely a whisper. You're addicted to control, Adrian. You control the firm, you control the deals, and you thought you could control me. You didn't even say anything back then, and now you're trying to block my resignation? Do you honestly think that's how you keep someone? I let out a dry, hollow laugh. You don't love me. You love your own power. You only love yourself. He recoiled, taking 2 steps back as if I struck him. The shock in his eyes told me the truth had finally landed. I. He gasped for air, but the words wouldn't come. I watched him. I watched his face shift from sheer panic to a slow, devastating stillness. He remained silent for what felt like an eternity before he finally spoke. It's my fault, he said, his voice low and hollow. I've spent our entire relationship managing you instead of listening to you. He took a deep, shuddering breath. If you want to resign, I'll accept it. If you want to get as far away from me as possible, I'll accept that, too. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with a profound, aching regret. Claire, this time, the call is yours. The room fell into a deafening silence. I looked at him. This was exactly what I wanted to hear. This was my freedom. But instead of feeling light, my chest felt like it had been crushed under a ton of bricks. My fingers gripped the blanket so hard my nails dug into my palms. Good, I heard myself say. Then stop bothering me. Just leave. The moment the words left my lips, my heart went into a violent spasm. It felt like I had just reached out and personally severed a vital cord. He stood there, the flicker of hope in his eyes dying out instantly. His broad shoulders slumped, his posture breaking for the first time. He turned slowly and walked toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he paused, but he didn't look back. I won't bother you again. But if you ever need me, for anything, you just have to say the word. It was so faint, it sounded like a dying man's last breath. The door clicked shut. The room went silent. I should have felt relieved. But the second his warmth and his scent vanished from the room, my breathing fractured. My chest tightened, a suffocating weight pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to call him back, to undo the words. I struggled to sit up, but the sudden movement sent a flare of agony through my right leg. I curled back into the blankets, sobbing. My body screamed in pain. My heart screamed louder. Tears flooded my eyes, unstoppable and hot. Pushing him out of my life hadn't made me feel better. It just made me feel alone. Claire POV. The recovery process moved swiftly. Within days, I was back at the office, navigating the familiar carpeted hallways with the awkward rhythm of my crutches. Adrian and I had reached a silent, unspoken accord. A curt nod upon passing, and a second later, we were strangers again. Only Emily remained restless. "It's infuriating," she hissed, leaning over my desk. I actually admired the guy. To think he was that prick all along. I swear, I regret not slapping the taste out of his mouth that day. I gently nudged her back toward her own cubicle. "Drop it, okay? Just let me have some peace. It's over." But as the words left my lips, that familiar, dull ache throbbed in my chest. Is it really over? I didn't know. My gaze drifted toward his office. Behind the glass partition sat a blurred silhouette. I snapped my eyes back to my screen, my pulse racing, hammering against my ribs. After work, my Uber pulled up to the curb. My eyes accidentally swept across the building's entrance, and there he was, watching me from a distance. Only after I was safely inside the car did he turn to walk away. As the car merged into traffic, the tears finally came. It felt like I had taken something priceless and thrown it away with my own hands. But what was the right thing to do? I didn't know. I truly didn't. All I knew was that every meal tasted like ash. And every night, my dreams dragged me back to the past. A few days later, I was buried in paperwork when Emily rushed over, her face taut with a look of impending disaster. She was breathless, her voice a forced whisper. "Claire, the CFO filed a formal complaint with the president. He is accusing Adrian of favoritism toward you. HR and compliance are grilling him in the conference room right now." My heart nearly stopped. The files in my hands scattered across the floor. My mind was a chaotic mess. But one thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. No. I wasn't going to let that old vulture in finance drag my name through the mud to get to Adrian. I scrambled to gather the documents and grabbed my crutches. "I'm going in," I said. Emily tried to block my path. I gave her a look of absolute steel. "I'm part of this, Emily. I'm not sitting this one out." The heavy door to the main conference room was cracked open just a sliver. Adrian was standing at the head of the table, facing the CFO, the HR director, and the head of compliance. He held his head high, radiating a cold, formidable power. Even facing three executives who outranked him in both title and seniority, he didn't flinch. I hesitated at the door, listening. "Favoritism?" Adrian let out a short, dry laugh. "You'd better have the data to back up that accusation." He walked over to the room's terminal and pulled up the attendance records on the large screen. "Claire has clocked more field visits than any other salesperson on the team. And she did it while carrying a surgical steel in her leg. Until a few days ago, when her body finally gave out and she had to be rushed to the hospital." He fixed the CFO with a chilling stare. "Does that sound like the workload of a favorite to you?" The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The compliance director cleared his throat. "Well, be that as it may, your prior relationship is a conflict of interest that should have been disclosed." Adrian smiled a thin, dangerous expression as he stepped back toward them. "Correct. Claire and I had a relationship. But we broke up the moment I left for the overseas assignment. I had zero contact with her until we crossed paths again at this firm." The CFO, sensing a weakness, pounced. "Then the rules apply. You have to recuse yourselves. Either you leave or she does." I felt Emily gasp beside me, her grip tightening on my arm. I patted her hand, trying to offer a comfort I didn't feel. Adrian squeezed out a contemptuous smirk. "I was hoping you'd say that. In fact, Claire turned in her resignation the very day I arrived. But I refused to authorize it. Because I couldn't get her commissions cleared in full." "We hold those commissions for a period," the CFO snapped. "That's policy. It's always been the rules." Adrian shot him a look of pure contempt. "Then her staying isn't on me, and it isn't on her. It's on this absurd, broken system that has zero respect for the sales staffs." The CFO snapped upright, eyes bulging. "That policy is there to prevent turnover. It's designed to help you maintain your sales force. Adrian gave a nonchalant shrug. Extorting employees to keep them from quitting? You call that a management strategy? I'm more than happy to cover that cost myself. Then, I'll personally walk her over to our biggest competitor. The CFO slammed his palm onto the desk. You wouldn't dare. She is bound by a non-compete clause. As a junior-level employee, Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, silky calm, she never signed one. The CFO's face turned a violent shade of crimson. He shot a frantic look at the compliance and HR directors. Both gave him a slow, reluctant nod of confirmation. The room fell into a heavy silence. Adrian turned his gaze toward the door. He froze for a heartbeat when he saw me, then strode over. Claire. Perfect timing. He gestured for me to follow him. I leaned on my crutches, moving into the room with a steady, determined rhythm until I stood right beside him in the center of the floor. Can you stand? He asked in a low voice. I nodded. Only then did he turn back to the three executives. I did love Claire. I loved her deeply. The room went dead quiet for a second. But what you should really be discussing isn't our romantic history. It's how a woman with a surgical steel in her leg managed to pull the best numbers in the entire sales department. The air in the room seemed to vanish. He fixed his gaze on the CFO. She didn't get here because of favoritism. Quite the opposite. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. This company has been bleeding her dry. And as for those backwards finance policies, I will fight them until they are wiped off the books. Permanently. In the end, HR and compliance ruled that the CFO's allegations were baseless. As I made my way out of the conference room, I was stunned to find a crowd of colleagues from the sales department gathered in the hallway. They broke into applause, whistling and cheering. I can't believe you two were a thing. You kept that deep under wraps, a colleague shouted. Not currently. I corrected. Oh, come on. You're perfect together. Just make it official. We'll see, I muttered with an awkward smile. My eyes catching Adrian's, his own smile looked just as forced, just as jagged. The crowd eventually thinned out. Adrian stayed by my side, looking like he wanted to reach out and support me but didn't quite have the nerve. Finally, he asked in a low voice. Does your leg hurt? I don't know why, but that one question made me want to cry more than all his I'm sorry's combined. I stayed silent for a few seconds before answering softly. A little. It was as if he'd finally been granted permission. He slowly reached out and took my arm. His touch so light and careful it felt like he was afraid I might shatter. He walked me all the way back to my desk. For the next few hours, we both buried ourselves in work, neither of us acknowledging the other. But late that afternoon, Emily came charging in with a massive announcement. The policy on withholding commissions had been abolished, effective immediately. Adrian had spent the last few hours in compliance, tearing the old rules apart. The entire sales floor erupted. People were scrambling to call colleagues out in the field to share the news. Emily leaned into my ear and yelled over the din. Adrian is officially the hottest director in this building. She let out a final cheer, then lowered her voice, looking at me tentatively. You know, aside from that one massive screw-up, he is not actually a total villain, is he? What do you think? I don't know. Maybe. I nudged her back to her workstation, my mind a chaotic, spinning mess. And it stayed that way, swirling in circles, until the clock finally struck 5. I reached for my phone to call an Uber, but Adrian stepped out of his office. He watched me in silence for a moment before walking over. For some reason, my pulse began to quicken. I'll drive you, he said softly. It was so natural, as if we were just ordinary colleagues. I hesitated for 2 seconds. Okay. I leaned on my crutches and began the slow, rhythmic shuffle toward the exit. He didn't try to help me. He simply walked beside me, matching my pace, only offering a gentle, steadying hand when it was time to climb into the passenger seat. Once we were both inside, he didn't start the engine. The air in the car felt thick, pressurized. I knew he was waiting. I was, too. Finance won't be withholding your commissions anymore, he said, his hands resting on the steering wheel. His eyes fixed straight ahead. If you still want to resign. I know, I whispered. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Another silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, he sounded like he was trying and failing to keep his tone casual. If you want to stay in the industry, I can give you a list of recommendations. Some of the top firms. My breathing fractured. It took a long time before I could force a fine out of my throat. Perhaps the atmosphere was becoming too suffocating for him. He finally started the engine. The low hum of the engine filled the space, masking the jagged edges of our conversation. So, have you decided? I'll decide once I'm fully recovered. He paused, letting out a long, heavy breath that sounded suspiciously like relief. He turned to look at me, his light blue eyes shimmering with a mixture of guilt and desperate hope. Claire, watching you struggle like this every day, it's killing me. Would you give me a chance to take care of you? Driving you to and from work, making you dinner. The words began to tumble out faster. I'm not begging for your forgiveness. It's just that every time I see you in pain, I hate myself a little more. He looked down, his breathing erratic. He looked like a man waiting for a sentence to be handed down. I studied the faint scowl of worry on his forehead, and suddenly, I was back in the past. 2 years ago, he had mapped out my entire future. When he would leave. How long he'd be gone. When he'd return. He'd even decided, on my behalf, that we would be happy. But now, for the first time, he was finally asking. The car hadn't moved yet, and my thoughts were beginning to crystallize against the vibration of the engine. The wall I had built around my heart for 2 years, the one I thought was impenetrable, finally showed a hairline fracture. After a moment, I gave him a faint smile. Just drive. He froze, his head turning slowly to meet my eyes. Take me home, I said quietly. His jaw tightened, the light in his eyes dimming just a fraction. I looked away, my fingers tightening around the seatbelt. I need to go back and grab some clothes. And some of my things. The air stayed still for 2 heartbeats. Then, he suddenly ducked his head and laughed. It was the sound of a man who had been underwater for too long, finally remembering how to breathe. The engine roared to life as we merged into the heavy flow of traffic. We caught each other's gaze in the reflection of the red lights, a quiet understanding passing between us. This time, we finally didn't let each other go. Claire POV. The next morning, as I sat in the passenger seat of Adrian's car on the way to work, I felt a strange sense of vertigo. 2 years ago, I had played this exact scene out in my head 1,000 times. I never imagined that when it finally happened, it would feel this incredibly quiet. This peaceful. We pulled into the underground parking garage. Adrian reached for my crutches, then moved with a steady, practiced strength to scoop me up, supporting my weight as he lifted me out of the car. I leaned against his chest, a small smile tugging at my lips. Then, a familiar voice rang out from just a few yards away. Morning. Wait, oh my God. You too, this is too perfect. I looked up. Julie, from our department, was standing just a few steps away, staring at us with a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated envy. The air went still for 2 heartbeats. Then, she spun around abruptly. I didn't see anything. I'm invisible. She vanished into the elevator bank before we could say a word. Adrian. Me. But when Adrian eventually helped me walk into the sales department, the entire floor went dead silent for a split second. And then, every single face lit up with a somehow creepy, knowing grin. It was the look of a crowd finally getting the happy ending they'd been waiting for. Emily was the worst of them. She practically lunged at us. Oh my God, I knew it. I freaking knew it. I let out a long sigh. Emily, please. The entire office erupted into laughter. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, my ears burning. I glanced back, and there was Adrian, standing a step away, watching me with a lopsided grin. The morning sun caught the light in his light blue eyes, making them look as soft and clear as lake water. In that moment, it hit me. Maybe just maybe from here on out, things really were going to get better.